Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome on into the 2019 Democratic primary debates, corporate free, here with a great panel. My name is Craig Jardula, and I have of the CONVO couch, of course, and if you want to get onto all our pages, we'll give you a little talk. I have a great panel in front of me today. We're going to be giving you breakdown before, breakdown after, and while things will be going on, we'll be throwing our little opinions up with red thumbs down or green thumbs up. To my right, I have Fiorella Isabel. How you doing today, Fiorella?
Good. Would you say my name right, fam?
Fiorella Isabel. I say it wrong. She's been my partner for how long and stuff. What are you expecting out of tonight, Fiorella?
I'm hopefully expecting the majority of the attention to go between Elizabeth Warren and Tulsi Gabbard. I think they're going to try to divert some of the attention to Cory Booker and to a couple of others, but I mostly think that the attention that progressives at least are hoping for is going to be that battle between Elizabeth Warren and Tulsi Gabbard.
Awesome. I'm going to give the first green thumbs up because that's what I'm hoping for today. We have a great setup. We're in somebody's beautiful house. Lauren Steiner's with us here today. How you doing, Lauren?
Great. How are you?
Did I say your name right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. So what do you expect out of today?
Well, I think Elizabeth Warren is going to clean up because that's just what's expected, and I do think that the questions are going to be very favorable towards her. I think she has a very winning style on the debate stage, and we can talk about their styles a little bit longer. I've been sort of studying because I'm in this long-running debate with Bernie advocates on Twitter who are constantly smearing Elizabeth Warren, which I don't like to do. And they're always talking policy, and I think that the average American voter is not going to pay attention to this distinction that we know very well, that the progressive punditry, if you will, are very familiar with the intricacies of their plans, and I think they respond more to their presentation. So I think she's going to do very well tonight, and I don't really see anybody else as breaking out.
Well, I think you're referring to some of us out there who've been very critical of Elizabeth Warren. It's obviously we've been very pro-Tulsi and have been a little combative when it comes to Elizabeth Warren. Where can people find your stream tonight as we're watching live?
Yes, on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/lauren.steiner.la.
All right, so she's expecting a lot out of Warren. Our next person on the panel, thank you for coming so far out from the OC, William Moses, riding in my summer Coupe de Ville. And I had to find a way to memorize it properly because I can never get it right and stuff. But William Moses is here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be a part of the party. Good to see you again, Lauren. As Lauren shared in the earlier advertisements, she shared that we were on the battlefield together, 2016 Democratic National Convention in support of Bernie Sanders. However, of course, tonight we are here to look at the debate without him on stage. And to your earlier point, you shared that Elizabeth Warren should be the standout today. I'm curious, clearly as well, to see how Tulsi is going to perform. Also, I'm also curious between Booker and Castro. And I guess Castro pops in mind for me right now because I met him, and both he and his brother 2 weeks ago at the California Democratic Party convention.
That's awesome that you met him because I would consider him a long shot out of the blue. And it's kind of funny. I'm just going to piggyback off to you before we get to the rest of our panel. Cory Booker. When you talk about a long shot today, when you talk about a guy who can come out of nowhere, because I believe if you're running for president, doesn't mean you're just running for president. You might be running for another job in the cabinet, some public notoriety for another position down the road. Cory Booker is one who made some noise at the KDM convention here in California. I met a person in the press room who just come from a big meeting, and they were so impressed with Elizabeth Warren. She's got a plan, and they were impressed with Cory Booker primarily because of his speech.
Yeah.
So he's a guy I think that can come out of left field today and maybe make some noise.
Right. Well, that's what I wanted to say about Cory Booker was very passionate, and you could tell if you use the audience at the California Democratic Convention as a barometer of the American public, you could see that Julian Castro got no traction. I was sitting there, and half the people in the audience were talking over him. They weren't even paying attention to what he had to say, and I actually kind of felt bad for the guy. Whereas Cory Booker was on fire, he was combative, he was hitting all the right notes. And I can't remember that one thing. I remember tweeting it out, what he said, that I thought was so powerful. Now I can't remember what it was.
Can I say something? I feel like that is all just like gonna only get us so far. I think the majority of the people are hurting economically, and I think focusing on the pandering by Cory Booker and the pretty words he said is only going to go so far in this primary and into the general. I think a lot of us are in an echo chamber in the Democratic Party, thinking that the way you speak matters so much anymore. I think it used to matter, but I think right now what matters are how are you going to help the American people? How are you going to help getting them out of this? And I consider Cory Booker someone that can speak eloquently and can put really nice things and say nice things, just like Elizabeth Warren. Although I feel like she gets a little bit caught up in being really angry and emotional. But I do think she knows the things she knows about. She knows her policy. But I still don't feel like it's enough to continuously repeat the same messages of we need to help America, we need to do this, we need to do that. I think it's just going to fall on deaf ears. And the Democratic Party and their mainstream media corporations may make it look like that these people are doing great. But overall, I think the people that are going to really stand out in general in the polls are going to be people that actually talk policy, and that's what Bernie Sanders is doing.
Well, I will differ with you based on a course that I took called Leadership, Organizing, and Action with Marshall Gans. And for those of you who don't know who Marshall Gans is, he left Harvard to be a freedom rider in the civil rights movement. Then he came out to California to work for Cesar Chavez in the grape workers strike. And then he cut his teeth with electoral politics in Nancy Pelosi's campaign. Then he went back to Harvard, where he finished up, and now he's a teacher, a professor at the Kennedy School of Government. And he was behind Obama's Organizing for America, which created the largest grassroots campaign in the history of campaigns in this country. Mm-hmm. And what we learned in that campaign is people make decisions based on emotion.
Yes.
Not reason. And emotion is evoked by stories, not reason, which is evoked by facts and statistics. Now, I will say that Bernie Sanders is the exception that proves the rule, because he can sit out there and talk about, the top 1% have the same amount of wealth as the bottom 90%, and, give you statistics till your eyes glaze over. But the difference and why people gravitate to him is that he is authentic and he's consistent and he's compassionate. And he has a 40-year history of that. Whereas when you look at some of these other candidates and you look at their history, their platitudes don't stand up. But on the simple level of oratory and getting people, like if you look at Obama's campaign speech at the convention of 2004, I hadn't heard of this guy before. I saw him make this speech, and I said, that guy is going to be president someday.
Absolutely.
And
I said the same thing.
I had no idea that it was going to be 4 years later. But see, he did the story of self. He talked about his Kenyan father and his grandfather who was World War II. The story of us, then he related it to the audience, and then the story of now, which is why does this have to happen in this moment?
Yes, but it's a different era. All right, I mean, now we have information on everything. If Barack Obama were running today and he had committed I don't want to say atrocities, but the policies of backing behind the banks and drone striking everywhere, it would have been all over every single piece of social media out there. So the fact that you can't just go out there, I think it's about being the complete thing. That's why I am so worried about Buttigieg. He's not. Did I say his name right?
Yeah.
He's on day 2.
I'm still trying to figure out his name correctly.
Yeah, so, PDB, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, but I think what you mentioned, Lauren, what I'm also curious in light of what we may see tonight in this debate is who is not there and who's going to win.
Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned Bernie. Okay. So I'm wondering. I'm curious to know how much the other candidates presence will be there, even though they're not there on the stage.
Yes.
That's a good question.
That's the point to consider. And I reflect, or even further deflect, back to obviously the 2016 presidential campaign during the Republican primaries, and when currently now President Donald Trump did not show up to the debate, but he was all over the
news
stage,
cycle,
in the news cycle,
Yeah.
and so forth. So I'm also curious to see who's gonna win, who's not there tonight.
I think the fact that tonight, even though these people that are on the stage tomorrow, it's going to have a lot of news cycle of what it's going to translate to what they're going to do tomorrow.
Yeah.
So tonight does in fact play a point in what happens tomorrow. Fiorella, we obviously know that you're a little bit pro Tulsi on the stage today. I know that because you're my partner and I live with you and stuff like that. Who is your solid number 2 today? We've never talked about that. On the stage tonight.
On the stage tonight, I really don't have a candidate that I think is someone that I would support that's a solid number 2. But I think as far as other people, because of the situation with immigration and because of his using kind of the immigration issue as his main issue, Castro, I feel like is another one to watch out. I would have said Buttigieg, but the recent scandals going on in South Bend, Indiana, regarding
He's not on tonight.
but in general on the stage, but
tonight.
Tonight then that would be Castro.
Do you have a solid number 2, Lauren? I mean, let's set the record straight. Number 1 tonight is Elizabeth Warren for you on that stage, or no?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think she's going to walk away with this. As far as the number 2, I'm thinking that, Inslee could come out strong if they ask a question about climate change. Now, the irony, because he's running an entire campaign on climate change. I was talking with one of our audience members here earlier about Andrew Yang, who's going to be on tomorrow, how he's banking on his universal basic income as his one big idea. Well, Inslee's going on climate change and what he was able to do in Washington State. But what's really interesting, and I don't know if you ever met Pam Keeley, but she was a Bernie delegate from Washington. She says that while he may have done some good things, he fast-tracked a lot of pipelines. So his entire record, and I guarantee you that the mainstream corporate media is not going to go into this because they never, ever ask the second question. They ask the first question, the candidate will answer it the way they want, which is sometimes not even answering the question.
Yeah.
And the last thing the mainstream media does is a follow-up question. Unless, of course, you're Cassie Hunt and you're interviewing Bernie this morning and you're giving him all these gotcha questions and you feel that he doesn't answer the question, then you're going to dig in and keep pursuing. And you'll notice that is really an exception because the mainstream corporate media is so afraid of Bernie that they refuse to, treat him the way they treat the others. And I would venture to say it's the same with Tulsi.
Yes, especially the war machine. William, you're a Bernie guy, correct?
Yes.
All right. For advocacy purpose, let's pretend. Who are your top 2 ranked candidates for tonight and why?
Tonight, I will go with Tulsi Gabbard. And it's a strong Elizabeth Warren.
I'm going to echo you that too. Even though I'm
Warren.
Tulsi won, I looked at this stage and I said if Tulsi were to leave this stage and she wouldn't be in the race, I don't know who I would vote for. I think you said you don't have a candidate. And Inslee, we talked about him when it comes to, but if I'm thinking strategically, I guess I would pick Elizabeth Warren, hoping that she maybe hand those delegates over to Bernie, but I don't trust her at all. I mean, to me, and I hate to dive into any type of controversial right away, but she's the biggest virtue signaler in the planet, on the face of the earth, on that stage. The fact that she wouldn't go out and talk to the Fox audience, to me, I thought that was dumb. I thought it was over. And then she followed up with regime change in Venezuela and green bombs. So, I mean, I have a lot of issues with Elizabeth Warren, but I still think she would be my number 2.
I just...
Gun to my head, maybe.
Right. Well, not gun to my head.
I'm sorry, if you don't support Medicare for all, you're done to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, and I think, obviously, because we're going to get into it later anyway, as an African-American voter in these, as Maya Angelou eloquently says, these yet to be United States of America, black folks we either take votes by being shot or by 1,000 paper cuts. Take your pick.
Yeah.
So it's just I'm curious to see who will come off sincere.
Well,
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question about that since you're not going to be here tomorrow when Joe Biden is on the stage. I don't know if you heard the Democracy Now! Interview yesterday with
I did not, but
with Jonathan Kozol. Okay, Jonathan Kozol wrote one of the books that has one of the biggest influences of me in my whole life. It's called There Are No Children Here. And it was about African-American children growing up in a Chicago housing project. And he has written other books, Savage Inequality. He totally focuses on this subject. And he did an appearance on Democracy Now! Talking about Joe Biden, that not only did he support James Eastland's, who is a segregationist and a racist, agenda, he was getting Eastland to support his agenda. He had his own independent agenda against busing.
That's Biden.
Yes, Biden, against busing. And Ezra Klein did a great article, I posted it today in Vox, which is his publication, about how Joe Biden was a product of his time and he had known nothing other than being in the Senate. He was elected to the Senate when he was 29 and he stayed all the way in it until, he became the vice president. And so he had good personal experiences in the Senate. When he lost his wife and his child in the car accident, the senators were there for him. So his experience and view of the Senate, which is the only place he's ever worked, when you think about it, is one of collegiality, one of family, one of a home. And that is why he has this idea that he can work across the aisle. But what Ezra Klein astutely notices is that the Republican Party has changed. And working across the aisle is absolutely what they do not want to do, what they never will do. And the idea that he can somehow do what he did in a Senate that is long gone, is fantasy. But my question is, so to William, they were interviewing African-American voters, most of them elderly, but a few younger people, in South Carolina, and they said, what do you think of these remarks about Eastland? And first of all, they weren't aware of this. And the reporter was saying, what we talk about on Twitter is not what the average American voter knows about. And when they were told about these remarks, when they were synopsized for them, they said, well, Barack picked him, he has to be good. So I'm like, thank God we're getting rid of old people, and thank God young people actually follow, what do you think about people, African Americans, supporting him because for the sole reason that Barack Obama picked him?
At best, I think it speaks to a couple of things. My knee-jerk reaction says I think it's shallow. Just straight out. I think it's very shallow. Then, as you think about the South and Southern culture, it's not necessarily who you know, but who's been with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's why Hillary did so well.
Right. That's why Hillary did so well. And even really on the flip side, that's why Donald Trump did so well. But more to, like I said, but to your issue, I think the gift of the technology age that we are in now is that we have more access to information, and the adults are not, or the elders are not the keys to not only the wisdom and the information at one time. So I disagree with it. And that's where I think the traditionally, and which is maybe why I'm here, the black church and the black preacher is becoming, one, more educated, and we're better informing the black culture, the black community as a whole, and even the greater community. Hence, I'm in Beverly Hills. So clearly the black preacher is getting around a little bit better now.
No, I hear you.
So, yeah.
And you're talking about some of the black people, reverends getting educated. Reverend Barber the other day was doing some preaching. So let's talk really quickly about the tweet and the effect it's going to have tonight. Did you really take offense to Tulsi's tweet? Do you know which tweet we're talking about?
I do not.
Okay.
About civility.
Lauren, before we get to Fiorella, what were your opinions about it, about the tweet? Overall, do you think it was bad? And then also give us a little sense politically how it might play out tonight.
Well, I thought it was a pandering tweet, okay? Because I think talking about civility when you've got this racist and you're giving cover to a racist is what you're doing. I mean, there were plenty of tweets that other people have put forth that we have criticized because we don't like the tweeter, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm worried that you two guys are going to like make excuses and rationalize for that tweet because you like Tulsi. So my overall opinion of it was unnecessary, just like I thought it was unnecessary for Hanna to endorse Joe Crowley or say some of the things that he has said about people that I think are objectionable. I think that, it would have been better for her to just remain silent on it. And I think she was trying, I don't know who she thought she was going after, who cares about civility right now?
Or who she was helping, right?
Politically, did you think it had any effect? Yes or no?
No, because like I said, I don't really feel that the average voter is on Twitter.
Okay. Fiorella.
Okay, so first of all, Pasta and I had a disagreement on this. So if you watch our show, we did like a little
Couch
debate
on
thing
fire.
because he feels differently about it than I do. I actually sort of agree with you. I feel like she shouldn't have said it. At least the first part of her tweet. I do feel she was calling out Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris because they are pandering and they are capitalizing on this issue. They've known Biden for years. Biden has been Biden for years. And all of a sudden now we're bringing this up. But as far as the context, as far as what Biden said when he was referring to Cory Booker and he said he didn't call me boy, that was a very stupid thing to say. That was a very racist thing to say. I don't like Joe Biden. I think he represents all of the backward things in the Democratic Party. I don't understand how Tulsi and Bernie like him because Bernie actually said Joe Biden is my friend.
He says everybody is his friend.
Yes,
you notice
but
that?
and he also said I don't believe Joe Biden is a racist. Though the one thing I do want to point out here, even though I don't agree with Tulsi saying this because I don't think she should have said anything, I think it was out of place. I think it did hurt her a little bit. I want to say that there is a hypocrisy here by taking what she says and saying she's canceled for some of these people, some of them Bernie supporters, and completely ignoring the policy behind Tulsi versus some of the policies that Elizabeth Warren is lacking, or some of the policies that Kamala Harris is lacking, or some of Kamala Harris's past. I mean, she's over there talking about racism as if she didn't put so many people of color in jail. Right. And I think it once again goes back to the issue of, yes, a lot of us are emotional. A lot of us go off of emotions when we read a tweet, but we really have to step back and analyze like who has the better policies and really look at that. Because so far, paying attention to pandering politicians like Barack Obama, who gave us a lot of beautiful words of hope and change, hasn't gotten us anywhere. And I think a lot of the youth is done with that.
And for your audience, the words racist, racism, they're being thrown around. And right. I think we need to clarify that racism is not solely about a good, bad binary, right? I.e., I quote Dr. Robin DiAngelo, who writes on white fragility as such. But then we need to talk about how racism works. And I think what both of you, both Lauren and Fiorella, you all are bringing out is how racism works in their pandering that they're doing, in their comments that they're making, or not needing to make any comments at all, right? Yeah. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that.
Well, on this particular issue, okay, so Joe Biden says he's not a racist, he's never been a racist, he's always been for civil rights. It is patently ridiculous when you are opposing busing to say that you are for civil rights. Either that or you know nothing about education. Because we have had a situation, Brown versus the Board of Education, that has made busing possible or necessary, where we had a separate but unequal school system in this country. And one of the best ways to alleviate that was to busing. Now, they couldn't integrate the neighborhoods because of the redlining, and they couldn't integrate a lot of other things, but they could integrate the schools. And since education policy is one of my issues, I will tell you that the gap between white and minority test scores was the lowest in 1988, which was the height of busing. It is the only thing that's been proven to lower the gap, and I've done shows on this. I'm going to be interviewing I'm hoping to interview Jonathan Kozol because he actually worked in an integrated school in the Boston suburbs for 2 years.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody's arguing Joe Biden's policies and how negative they were and how racist they were back in the day. When Tulsi tweeted, she tweeted about what he said on Friday night at a event. Now, don't get me wrong. It wasn't just people of color who were hurt. Anti-war people were disgusted when they heard Tulsi talking about Joe Biden. We said, of all people you have to mention him. But what he was talking about is something that also plays into Tulsi's main theme of why she's running. It's just not about anti-regime. It's about sitting down and talking to people that disagree with you, that people you would abhor, that people you don't agree with. And that's the problem with nowadays. And we know a lot of these people. We know these activists who will immediately point the finger and say, you're privileged, you're a racist, what are you talking about? You have to feel this way or else. And that is a big issue. So I think that Tulsi, not only did she seize on this moment to make that point, but she also made a political move, because if we're thinking about this, and somebody put this up on one of our YouTubes, when it comes to Joe Biden's voters, you can beat them to death about what he did back in the days and everything, whatnot. You can air all the dirty laundry you want. Those Joe Biden voters, those older class, they're not moving. She's the first one to make a bridge to those voters. So if Joe Biden drops out, maybe he might endorse Tulsi. I don't think he wants to run in the first place, but a lot of Tulsi voters, and that's something to think about.
You
A
don't
lot of
think
Biden
Joe
voters.
Biden wants to run in the first place?
No.
Barack Obama
No.
begged Joe Biden not to run.
Yes, but I believe the establishment and the Clintons begged him to run because they didn't have the candidate they wanted. And if anything, to clog up the
they did.
thing.
They had Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
She was the favored
She was
son.
supposed
remember?
to
But
be
she
the
was
favorite
just
son.
like the Republicans. She was just like Jeb Bush. She couldn't get out of her own way. When we were at the KDEM, she had the worst weekend. The delegates said that this woman fell down on her face. She didn't make an impact at all in her own home state.
Right.
Warren
because-
made the big
well,
impact.
Well, you know why that is? Because it is her own home state, and we're familiar with her work as a district attorney, as an attorney general, and as a senator.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So
I'll
the
share.
finish what you're saying. I'm
I was
sorry.
going to say, I'll share something with you that Pat Harris told me. And you know Pat Harris
Very
is running
well.
for Senate.
Yep.
And he is an attorney. And he said he has friends in the Attorney General's office. And they said Kamala Harris was missing in action. No
Yep.
sooner did she get elected to that office than she began her campaign for Senate. She is very, very ambitious.
Yes.
And that's why sometimes when she says, I'm shocked. I did not know that my office, said we shouldn't have early release of prisoners because it provides free labor. It's very possible that she didn't know because she wasn't in her office doing her damn job.
Right.
Yeah.
And to your point about her being ambitious, that's where my hesitation is around Elizabeth Warren, my uneasiness around Elizabeth Warren, because I'm seeing her being ambitious more than her sincerity. Not to say that she's not sincere, but I see more ambition, as is the case with most of these presidential candidates. Which, like I said, I'm curious to see whose presence will be on this debate stage tonight.
Have
Well,
you ever
you
heard
know-
about the rope-a-dope? Have you heard about the
Yes,
Muhammad? I've been
yes.
saying this the whole time.
Yeah.
Tulsi went out and took a shot at Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker. They're going to be on that stage tonight.
Yeah.
It's going to be in the head. You know what I'm saying? Like, Tulsi's going to be coming after you. I think that's what I thought. That's what I saw. I'm calling the rope-a-dope. I know she's what she's doing. For the first 48 hours of kind of analyzing that tweet leading up to this debate tonight, I was saying, what the heck is in Tulsi Gabbard's head? What could be going through it?
I think you're just focusing too much on social media. And again, I think I have to keep bringing this panel back to the audience out
Okay.
there and what the average voter knows. You talk about policy. You talk about millennials. I was working out with my physical therapist just yesterday, and she was saying, "Oh, I heard about that plan. What's your guy's name again?" I'm like, Bernie Sanders, and then there was a woman and about the student debt, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. Which one do you like better? Well, I'm not really that familiar with the plan, but I got to tell you, and this is an African American woman in her late 20s who's very focused on. She says wealth, but I think what she just means is financial security. She is not going to graduate school for physical therapy because she doesn't want to accumulate any more student debt. And I said, do you understand that this man is going to eliminate your debt? You will not have any undergraduate debt. So now you can go on to graduate school. And I said, when I tell you this, or when you hear this, doesn't that make you want to go out and not just vote for him, but do everything in your power to get him elected? And her answer was, you know what? Politicians are always telling you things, and then they never do it. And see, this is what the average person...
Yeah, but the average person in the general election is different than the average person in a primary. The average person in a primary is going to be online. They're going to be reading the tweets because it's more politically inclined people. To get people out for a primary is going to be different than the big dance. So I think that all these tweets, all these social media stuff that's going on, it matters, and it matters a lot.
Rather than an either or kind of
Rather
than an either or kind of approach to the average American voter, we have to pay attention to social media just as much as we hate paying attention to mainstream media, just as much as we got to get out in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean...
that's going to be it. Whoever has the best canvassing operation, whoever has more... And I was just talking to a super volunteer from Orange County from 2016 today, a Bernie super volunteer, and she was very concerned about the direction that the Bernie campaign is going in California, because she said, look, we've got 1 million volunteers in the country. We've got 100,000 in California alone, and they have not been deployed yet. They hired this staff. Nobody knows what this staff is doing. And she says, what do you think is the most important thing that the volunteers can be doing right now? And I said, going door to door and having one-on-one conversations about Bernie Sanders, because they need to break through the mainstream media. Mm-hmm. They're covering him a lot now, unlike last time, but they're covering
the
him
ratings are
so
good now.
Negatively that if you just watch mainstream media, not only are you going to have an erroneous view of Bernie Sanders, you're going to have a negative view of Bernie Sanders. So it really involves us in going door to door, because that's how you convince people with one-on-one conversations.
Well, that's part, like Fiorella, you said it was both, didn't you? It's about social media, it's about campaigning, it's about air game, walking game.
It's about the campaign also paying attention to the grassroots, because the grassroots, especially of California, knows the field. We know the people. We know how a lot of these people think and the things they do. And it's also important that these Democrats know that you're not just going there to get the centrist. I think a lot of these politicians are being ill-advised to just focus on the centrist. We need to focus on the young people, and the people who aren't even young but who have never voted, and who, like the person Lauren interacted with, doesn't believe in politicians. And I get that all the time. I get people saying, why do you care about politics? The politicians are all corrupt. They're not going to change. They're not going to do anything. We have to give them a reason to vote. And the candidate that can most motivate people to actually go out there and vote is the candidate that's going to win. And you motivate people by speaking to their concerns empathetically. I'm not saying eliminate that, empathy that people have when you're talking about a story or something you endured. I'm saying use it, but be truthful and genuine about it, instead of trying to pretend you are something you're not, which is what I have a problem with Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris. They do a lot of pretending.
I don't think that's true. And, I don't know if we're going to get into this right now, but I have to say that I've been following Elizabeth Warren since 2009. I was part of a group that drafted her to run for Senate. And the reason is it's been her lifetime's work, just like it's been Bernie's lifetime's work, to advocate for the middle class. Now, yes, she's not advocating for poor people necessarily. It's always been about the middle class. But, the middle class today is poor because of what she's been advocating. Yeah. Her work as a scholar, as a professor, as an author, as an advisor to, the Obama administration starting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. She had no political aspiration. She had to be drafted into running for Senate. And everybody knows the story that Bernie would not have run in 2016 if Elizabeth had won. Yeah. But she did not want to take on Hillary Clinton. Now, everybody makes this a negative about her. Ooh, she didn't endorse Bernie when she could have. Well, I know for a fact that Elizabeth Warren signed on to Barbara Boxer's secret letter where she got all the women
she asked Hillary to run.
No, they said, would you support Hillary Clinton for president in 2016? And all the women senators, including Elizabeth Warren, signed it. But guess what? When Barbara Boxer had her fundraiser in 2016, Elizabeth Warren was the only woman senator not there. And she waited until all the primaries were finished, until Hillary had enough delegates to win that nomination before endorsing her.
Yeah, but
and in her little Elizabeth Warren way, that was courage for her.
That was.
I'm sorry.
It's not
I
an
disagree with
excuse.
that.
That's saying you're pandering to the money aspects instead of pandering to what the policies in which you say you stand for. If you're for the poor and middle class, she should have been out in front with Bernie Sanders from the get-go. And also her touting this Native American thing, and she doesn't show up to Standing Rock.
She doesn't tout it.
She went and got a
she
test
wrote
for it.
That's to counter all the pushback.
But
She wrote it on her
She took the bait.
application because
Right.
that's what her relatives always told her.
Well, I guess my concern, and I hear your point, Lauren. My challenge with, like I said, with Senator Warren is that this presidential run seems more ambitious than sincere for me. That's that's where I'm getting.
I
at.
feel the same way.
Because when Obama was running and she gave a speech before Obama was up for re-election for president. She was the real advocate for people. She shared and basically said the economy is rigged while Obama is up for re-election. And then, like I said, for her to make the bait and switch and then now back here again, I just think she could serve better, as a U.S. Senator, Senate Majority Leader, with hopefully whichever Democratic president will get, or Democratic president will get. However, I do appreciate her presence here in this primary because I think it makes all the candidates stronger regardless.
Lauren, really quickly, because we got to get ready for the debate within 10 minutes. What does Elizabeth Warren have to avoid tonight to make it a successful night for Elizabeth Warren?
Well, see, here's what I mean about the mainstream media favoring her. I betcha, we'll see if they ask a question about Medicare for all, and we'll see how she answers the question about Medicare for all, because quite frankly, that is the litmus test for me. And that is why I don't support her for president, because she co-sponsored Bernie's bill, but then she immediately, not that she backtracked on co-sponsoring it and saying she's for it, but she's talking about other ways to get there, whether it's the public option, whether it's lowering the age to get into Medicare, whatever it is, and that is not going to work because we have to rip the Band-Aid off with private insurance. So if they ask a question about Medicare for all and she says she's for it, and they don't do the follow-up question and say, but what about the private health insurance? What about single payer? If they don't ask that question, then we know that the media is rigging it for her. But if they do ask that question, and that's going to be the tell-all for me. And also, if the audience, is going to notice that there's a difference, because I contend that the average viewer does not know. They're very confused about Medicare for all. And Cassie Hunt even asked Bernie about that this morning and said, what do you think about private insurance? And he did not answer correctly, in my opinion. He should have said, private insurance profits from denying people care. We have to get rid of private insurance. They actually call it a medical loss on their balance sheet when they have to pay out a claim. So why would you put a private entity in charge of providing someone's health care when they profit from denying that health care? He's got to speak more plainly and clearly about this. And also then her follow-up question was, well, aren't people's taxes are going to go up? And he's got into his health care as a right, not a privilege, and all his macro rhetoric. He needs to say, yes, their taxes are going to go up, but overall, the average person will spend less because they won't have co-pays, premiums, and deductibles.
Good.
He needs a better communications director.
Yeah, so Elizabeth Warren cannot get tripped up on universal health care, Medicare for all. You think it could be the thorn in her side. Fiorella, Tulsi, what has she got to do to come out of this victorious tonight?
I think she's got to be a little bit more she's a very logical person. She's very good on talking about policy, but she's got to get her name out there and let other people know who she is, why she's different than the rest of the candidates. Explain more why her foreign policy relates to domestic issues, because to a lot of people here in the United States, they're not even thinking about foreign policy. that is the last on their list. They don't really care because they're too busy trying to survive this economic system that has burdened them. And so in order for people to actually hear her and hear what she has to say and why staying out of war is so important, I think she has to speak to a little bit of how that connects to domestic policy in the bigger picture, and also how the civility thing can be a good thing in the very divided country we are in, which is something that I think she'll do anyway.
I think that's a great point too. William?
I guess to pick up on what you said regarding civility, there has been a meme or a tweet or a saying going around on social media saying, I can get with civility, just not at the cost of my oppression.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And so that's what I would like to see in this debate. Like I said, we're going to be looking at style. We're going to be looking at substance. That's what we do. But I question this whole debate debacle almost because I just got word. A friend of mine called me and told me, I don't know how true it is, but the average ticket for this debate is like $3,000 or $5,000 or something.
Yeah,
like that
they gave out some
capacity.
grassroots tickets. So
You know that Tulsi, I'm so sorry real quick, and then I'll let you say real quick, but we're talking about Tulsi civility, all this stuff, that Mike Gravel's teenagers, the teens that work on Mike Gravel's campaign, and fam, you mentioned, it's a shame that Mike Gravel is not in these debates, because if you go back and watch him, he was late and he slated.
Yeah.
That's some hipster talk, fam.
Yeah.
But Tulsi got the teens, the Mike Gravel teams, tickets to this debate. How about that?
That's great.
You wanted to say something, Lauren. Go right ahead.
I want to say real quickly about Tulsi. I think she needs to do two things tonight to break out of the pack. One, she needs to tell her personal story. I heard her little 5-minute speech at the Democratic thing. She went through her policy platforms. She didn't say anything at all about who she was and why she's president. We need to have that personal narrative, and she needs to have a little bit more passion in her voice. She is very aloha. She is very chill. And that maybe works, in Hawaii, but I think she needs to have the same kind of passion that Bernie has, that Elizabeth Warren has, that Cory Booker has, along with the policies. Because sometimes she puts me to sleep. I think it's either white noise or listening to a Tulsi Gabbard speech.
Oh, gosh.
No,
she's not that bad.
Her tone
she's not like Rusty Hicks bad.
Her tone is so
Kevin De Leon bad.
She's so soothing.
She could jump it up a little bit. I agree. She needs a little bit more emphasis, a little bit more oomph. She needs a little bit more about that personal stuff.
That's Tulsi though. It wouldn't be Tulsi. She wouldn't be Tulsi if that wasn't Tulsi, right? I need that relaxation. I got enough anxiety in my world.
The
right?
yoganist.
I need that home, right?
But I still agree with Lauren to a point that when it comes to
the personal story,
you have to got a little bit of Obama.
Yep.
You got to have a little bit of hello. That was my Obama imitation. I'm sorry if it wasn't good, but you got to have a little bit about that. I think we're getting close to the debate. Really quick question. Does Beto O'Rourke make it on to the next debate, or is he done tonight?
I think he's done.
I think he's done.
I think he's done too, and I think that he was very lucky that he wasn't with Pete Buttigieg. We're going to go over to the stage, Johnny. Is it time? He's here. Beto O'Rourke's in the house. He'll be on stage tonight.
He's here.
Remember, we'll have these green thumbs up or red thumbs down when a candidate says something, if it gets platitudey or what we want to do. If we don't put it up, that means it was just ish and we had nothing negative or positive to say. Stay with us over here on the CONVO Couch Robust Opposition Collaboration for the 2019 Democratic debates. Thank you for joining in, and we'll see you after the debates and during the commercials.
Abortion. There were no questions about funding from Planned Parenthood and the stripping back of reproductive freedom. So that being a central issue with Georgia and Missouri and all these other states, candidates need to speak clearly on that issue and look like they understand what's at stake for American women, because again, women are going to be the difference in this election, just like they were in 2018 and in 2016 and all the elections previously.
Which is interesting because I think this cycle we've seen a lot of issues come to hopefully the debate stage, but also just into the election cycle that we didn't really anticipate. For example, reparations, right?
Yeah,
or even the Green New Deal. I mean, these were once thoughts that you would consider, in your freshman dorm form poli-sci class, and now they're probably going to reach the national debate stage. So are there any other issues, Alex, that we should look out for or listen for that maybe haven't been discussed or even reported?
You know, I actually think just because of the events of today, immigration is just going to be top of mind for everybody. And it would be curious if any of the candidates really go beyond just comprehensive immigration reform and attacking Trump, but actually articulate a positive, a different vision for immigration, whether or not it's Beto O'Rourke, who's from the border, or it's Julian Castro, who obviously is the only Latino candidate in the race.
Right. And as they articulate that, we heard those students say they wanted the style and they want the substance. But is this going to be an opening night about style? I mean, are these candidates going to try to grab those tomorrow morning headlines?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Everybody's going for that.
Everyone agrees on that.
You have to. I mean, I worked for Romney, Gingrich, and Carson. I've been to every single presidential debate with those three individuals. You have to have a moment that tomorrow morning's headlines will say, did you see what so-and-so said? Particularly now, because the media dynamics have changed from 4, 8, 12 years ago.
They're so instantaneous.
Right.
Right.
I would argue it's even changed from 2016. It's a little bit quicker than it was in 2016. And also now there are a lot of trolls and bots that we weren't aware that they were trolls and bots in 16.
Disinformation.
And disinformation. So now we have to be on the lookout for that. I think the Democratic campaigns are going to have to navigate a whole new terrain this year.
It's a whole new terrain that we are about to see them navigate as we speak. Guys, the debate is about to start. You can see those candidates there lining up in the podium. You can watch this on NBC News, on Telemundo, on MSNBC. We want to give a big thank you to Zerlina, Shermichael, Alex, and Jackie. They're going to stick with us. We're going to have a post-debate show because we will be right back after the debate with more from our college panel as well and analyses from these guys. But for now, we are going to hand it over to our team in Miami, and we hope that you enjoy watching this debate as much as we will. See you soon.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lester Holt, and welcome to the first Democratic debate in the 2020 race for president.
Hi, I'm Savannah Guthrie, and tonight it's our first chance to see these candidates go head-to-head on stage together. We'll be joined in our questioning tonight by our colleagues Jose Diaz-Balart, Chuck Todd, and Rachel Maddow.
Voters are trying to nail down where the candidates stand on the issues, what sets them apart, and which of these presidential hopefuls has what it takes.
Well, now it's time to find out.
Tonight, round one, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, former Housing Secretary Julian Castro, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, former Maryland Congressman John Delaney, Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, Washington Governor Jay Inslee, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke, Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan, and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. From NBC News, Decision 2020, the Democratic Candidates Debate. Live from the Adrian Arsht Performing Arts Center in Miami, Florida.
Again, everyone, welcome to the candidates and to our audience here in Miami, here in the Arts Center, and all across the country. Tonight, we're going to take on many of the most pressing issues of the moment, including immigration, the situation unfolding at our border, and the treatment of migrant children.
And we're going to talk about the tensions with Iran, climate change, and of course, we'll talk about the economy, those kitchen table issues so many Americans face every day.
And some quick rules of the road before we begin. 20 candidates qualified for this first debate. We'll hear from 10 tonight and 10 more tomorrow. The breakdown for each was selected at random. The candidates will have 60 seconds to answer and 30 seconds for any follow-ups.
Because of this large field, not every person will be able to comment on every topic, but over the course of the next 2 hours, we will hear from everyone. We'd also like to ask the audience to keep the reactions to a minimum. We are not going to be shy about making sure the candidates stick to time tonight.
All right, so with that business out of the way, we want to get to it. And we'll start this evening with Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator, good evening to you.
Thank you.
You have many plans: free college, free childcare, government health care. cancellation of student debt, new taxes, new regulations, the breakup of major corporations. But this comes at a time when 71% of Americans say the economy is doing well, including 60% of Democrats. What do you say to those who worry this kind of significant change could be risky to the economy?
So I think of it this way. Who is this economy really working for? It's doing great for a thinner and thinner slice at the top. It's doing great for giant drug companies. It's just not doing great for people who are trying to get a prescription filled. It's doing great for people who want to invest in private prisons, just not for the African Americans and Latinx whose families are torn apart, whose lives are destroyed, and whose communities are ruined. It's doing great for giant oil companies that want to drill everywhere, just not for the rest of us who are watching climate change bear down upon us. When you've got a government, when you've got an economy that does great for those with money and isn't doing great for everyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple. We need to call it out, we need to attack it head on, and we need to make structural change in our government, in our economy, and in our country.
Senator Klobuchar, you've called programs like free college something you might do if you were, quote, a magic genie. To be blunt, are the government programs and benefits that some of your rivals are offering giving your voters, people, a false sense of what's actually achievable?
Well, first, the economy. We know that not everyone is sharing in this prosperity, and Donald Trump just sits in the White House and gloats about what's going on when you have so many people that are having trouble affording college and having trouble affording their premiums. So I do get concerned about paying for college for rich kids. I do. But I think my plan is a good one, and my plan would be to, first of all, make community college free, and make sure that everyone else besides that top percentile gets help with their education. My own dad and my sister got their first degrees with community college. There's many paths to success, as well as certifications. Secondly, I'd use Pell Grants. I'd double them from $6,000 to $12,000 a year and expand it to the number of families that get covered, to families that make up to $100,000. And then the third thing I would do is make it easier for students to pay off their student loans. Because I can tell you this, if billionaires can pay off their yachts, students should be able to pay off their student loans.
That's time, thank you. Congressman O'Rourke, what we've just been discussing and talking about is how much fundamental change to the economy is desirable and how much is actually doable. In that vein, some Democrats want a marginal individual tax rate of 70% on the very highest earners, those making more than $10 million a year. Would you support that? And if not, what would your top individual rate be?
This economy has got to work for everyone. And right now we know that it isn't. And it's going to take all of us coming together to make sure that it does. Necesitamos incluir cada persona en el éxito de esta economía. Pero si queremos hacer eso, necesitamos incluir cada persona en nuestra democracia. Cada votante necesitamos la representación y cada voz necesitamos escuchar. Right now, we have a system that favors those who can pay for access and outcomes. That's how you explain an economy that is rigged to corporations and to the very wealthiest. A $2 trillion tax cut that favored corporations while they were sitting on record piles of cash, and the very wealthiest in this country at a time of historic wealth inequality. A new democracy that is revived because we returned power to the people, no PACs, no gerrymandering, automatic and same-day voter registration to bring in more voters, and a new Voting Rights Act to get rid of the barriers that are in place now. That's how we each have a voice in our democracy and make this economy work for everybody.
That's time, sir. I'll give you 10 seconds to answer. If you want to answer the direct question, would you support a 70% individual marginal tax rate? Yes, no, or pass?
I would support a tax rate and a tax code that is fair to everyone. Tax capital 70%? At the same rate that you tax ordinary income. Take that corporate tax rate up to 28%. You would generate the revenues you need to pay for the programs we're talking about.
That's time. Thank you. Senator Booker, there is a debate in this party right now about the role of corporations, as you know. Senator Warren, in particular, put out a plan to break up tech companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google. You've said we should not, quote, be running around pointing at companies and breaking them up without any kind of process. Why do you disagree?
I don't think I disagree. I think we have a serious problem in our country with corporate consolidation. And you see the evidence of that in how dignity is being stripped from labor. And we have people that work full-time jobs and still can't make a living wage. We see that because consumer prices are being raised by pharmaceutical companies that often have monopolistic holds on drugs. And you see that by just the fact that this is actually an economy that's hurting small businesses and not allowing them to compete. One of the most aggressive bills in the Senate to deal with corporate consolidation is mine about corporate consolidation in the ag sector. So I feel very strongly about the need to check the corporate consolidation and let the free market work. And I'll tell you this, I live in a low-income black and brown community. I see every single day that this economy is not working for average Americans. The indicators that are being used from GDP to Wall Street's rankings is not helping people in my community. It is about time that we have an economy that works for everybody, not just the wealthiest in our nation.
But quickly, Senator Booker, you did say that you didn't think it was right to name names, to name companies and single them out, as Senator Warren has. Briefly, why is that?
Well, again, I will single out companies like Halliburton or Amazon that pay nothing in taxes and our need to change that. And when it comes to antitrust law, what I will do is, number one, appoint judges that will enforce it. Number two, have a DOJ and a Federal Trade Commission that will go through the processes necessary to check this kind of corporate concentration. At the end of the day, we have too much of a problem with corporate power growing. We see that with everything from Citizens United and the way they're trying to influence Washington. It's about time that we have a president that fights for the people in this country who need to have someone that's a champion for them.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Warren, I mentioned you. Are you picking winners and losers?
So the way I understand this is there is way too much consolidation now in giant industries in this country. That hurts workers, it hurts small businesses, it hurts independent farmers, it hurts our economy overall, and it helps constrict real innovation and growth in this economy. Now look, we've had the laws out there for a long time to be able to fight back. What's been missing is courage. Courage in Washington to take on the giants. That's part of the corruption in this system. It has been far too long that the monopolies have been making the campaign contributions, have been funding the super PACs, have been out there making sure that their influence is heard and felt in every single decision that gets made in Washington. Where I want to start this is I want to return government to the people, and that means calling out the names of the monopolies and saying, I have the courage to go after them.
Thank you.
Secretary Castro, the next question is for you. Democrats have been talking about the pay gap for decades. What would you do to ensure that women are paid fairly in this country?
Thank you very much for that question, Lester. You know, I grew up with a mother who raised my brother Joaquin and me as a single parent. And I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to rent a home and to worry about whether you're going to be able to pay the rent at the first of the month, and to see a mom work very, very hard and know that moms across this country are getting paid less simply because they're women. I would do several things, starting with something we should have done a long time ago, which is to pass the Equal Rights Amendment finally in this country, and also pursue legislation so that women are paid equal pay for equal work in this country. It's past time that we did that. And, you know, we have to do this. If we want to be the most prosperous nation in the 21st century, we need to make sure that women are paid what they deserve.
All right, thank you. I want to put the same question to Congresswoman Gabbard. Your thoughts on equal pay?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's recognize the situation we're in, that the American people deserve a president who will put your interests ahead of the rich and powerful. That's not what we have right now. I enlisted in the Army National Guard after the al-Qaeda terror attacks on 9/11, so I could go after those who had attacked us on that day. I still serve as a major, served over 16 years, deployed twice to the Middle East, and in Congress serve on the Foreign Affairs and Armed Services Committees for over 6 years. I know the importance of our national security, as well as the terribly high cost of war. And for too long, our leaders have failed us, taking us from one regime change war to the next, leading us into a new Cold War and arms race, costing us trillions of our hard-earned taxpayer dollars and countless lives. This insanity must end. As president, I will take your hard-earned taxpayer dollars and instead invest those dollars into serving your needs. Things like health care, a green economy, good-paying jobs, protecting our environment, and so much more.
Mayor de Blasio, good evening. You're the mayor of the biggest city in the United States, but it's also one of the cities in the country with the greatest gap between the wealthy and the poor. How would you address income inequality?
Well, we've been addressing income inequality in New York City by raising wages, by raising benefits, by putting money back in the hands of working people. $15 minimum wage, paid sick days, pre-K for all, things that are making a huge difference in working people's lives. But let me tell you, what we're hearing here already in the first round of questions is that battle for the heart and soul of our party. I want to make it clear. This is supposed to be the party of working people. Yes, we're supposed to be for a 70% tax rate on the wealthy. Yes, we're supposed to be for free college, free public college for our young people. We are supposed to break up big corporations when they're not serving our democracy. This Democratic Party has to be strong and bold and progressive. And in New York, we've proven that we can do something very different. We can put money back in the hands of working people. And let me tell you, every time you talk about investing in people and their communities, you hear folks say there's not enough money. What I say to them every single time is there's plenty of money in this world. There's plenty of money in this country. It's just in the wrong hands. We Democrats have to fix that.
Congressman Delaney, do you agree?
I think we need to do real things to help American workers and the American people. Right? This is the issue that all of us here on the campaign trail. We need to make sure everyone has a living wage. And I've called for a doubling of the earned income tax credit, raising the minimum wage, and creating paid family leave. That will create a situation where people actually have a living wage. That gets right to workers. Then we got to fix our public education system. It's not delivering the results our kids need, nor is college and post-high school career and technical training programs doing that. You know, I'm very different than everyone else here on the stage. Prior to being in Congress, I was an entrepreneur. I started 2 businesses. I created thousands of jobs. I spent my whole career helping small to mid-sized businesses all over the country. 5,000 of them I supported. The Obama administration gave me an award for lending to disadvantaged communities. I know how to create jobs. We need a short-term strategy, which is to put money in the pockets of workers with the earned income tax credit, raising the minimum wage and creating paid family leave. And then we need to have a long-term strategy to make sure this country is competitive and we're creating jobs everywhere in this country.
Governor Inslee, how would you address income inequality?
Well, I'm a little bit surprised. I think plans are great, but I'm a governor. And we got to realize the people who brought us the weekend, unions, are going to bring us a long overdue raise in America. And I'm proud of standing up for unions. I've got a plan to reinvigorate collective bargaining so we can increase wages finally. I marched with the SEIU folks. It is not right that the CEO of McDonald's makes 2,100 times more than the people slinging hash at McDonald's. And the next thing I'll do is put people to work in the jobs of the present and the future. Look at Donald Trump is simply wrong. He says wind turbines cause cancer. We know they cause jobs. And we know that we can put millions of people to work in the clean energy jobs of the future. Carpenters, IBEW's members, machinists. We're doing it in my state today. And then we can do what America always does, lead the world and invent the future and put people to work. That's what we're going to do.
Congressman Ryan, President Trump, and you just referred to him, promised that manufacturing jobs were all coming back to places like your home state of Ohio. Can you make that same promise?
Yes, I believe you can. But first, let's say the president came, he said, don't sell your house to people in Youngstown, Ohio. And in his administration, just in the last 2 years, we lost $4,000 4,000 jobs at a General Motors facility. That rippled throughout our community. General Motors got a tax cut. General Motors got a bailout. And then they have the audacity to move a new car that they're going to produce to Mexico. I've had family members that have to unbolt a machine from the factory floor, put it in a box, and ship it to China. My area where I come from in Northeast Ohio, this issue we're talking about here, it's been going on 40 years. This is not a new phenomenon in the United States of America. The bottom 60% haven't seen a raise since 1980. Meanwhile, the top 1% control 90% of the wealth. We need an industrial policy saying we're going to dominate building electric vehicles. There's going to be 30 million made in the next 10 years. I want half of them made in the United States. I want to dominate the solar industry and manufacture those here in the United States.
Senator Warren, are they coming back? Are these jobs coming back?
So we've had an industrial policy in the United States for decades now, and it's basically been let giant corporations do whatever they want to do. Giant corporations have exactly one loyalty, and that is to profits. And if they can save a nickel by moving a job to Mexico or to Asia or to Canada, they're going to do it. So here's what I propose for an industrial policy. Start with a place where there's a real need. There's going to be a worldwide need for green technology, ways to clean up the air, ways to clean up the water. And we can be the ones to provide that. We need to go tenfold in our research and development on green energy going forward. And then we need to say, any corporation can come and use that research. They can make all kinds of products from it, but they have to be manufactured right here in the United States of America. And then we have to double down and sell it around the world. There's a $23 trillion market coming for green products. We should be the leaders and the owners, and we should have that 1.2 million manufacturing jobs here in America. We can do this.
All right, we're going to turn to the issue of health care right now and really try to understand where there may or may not be daylight between you. Many people watching at home have health insurance coverage through their employer. Who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? Just a show of hands, starting off with. All right, well, Senator Klobuchar, let me put the question to you. You're one of the Democrats who wants to keep private insurance in addition to a government health care plan. Why is an incremental approach, in your view, better than a sweeping overhaul?
Well, I think it's a bold approach. It's something that Barack Obama wanted to do when we were working on the Affordable Care Act, and that is a public option. I am just simply concerned about kicking half of America off of their health insurance in 4 years, which is exactly what this bill says. So let me go on beyond that. There is a much bigger issue in addition to that, and that is pharmaceuticals. The president literally went on TV, on Fox, and said that people's heads would spin when they see how much he would bring down pharmaceutical prices. Instead, 2,500 drugs have gone up in double digits since he came into office. Instead, he gave $100 billion in giveaways to the pharma companies. For the rest of us, for the rest of America, that's what we call at home, all foam and no beer. We got nothing out of it. And so my proposal is to do something about pharma, to take them on, to allow negotiation under Medicare, to bring in less expensive drugs from other countries. And pharma thinks they own Washington. Well, they don't own me.
Your time is up. Thank you. Senator Warren, you signed on to Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan. It would put essentially everybody on Medicare and then eliminate private plans that offer similar coverage. Is that the plan or path that you would pursue as president?
So yes, I'm with Bernie on Medicare for All, and let me tell you why. I spent a big chunk of my life studying why families go broke. And one of the #1 reasons is the cost of health care, medical bills. And that's not just for people who don't have insurance. It's for people who have insurance. Look at the business model of an insurance company. It's to bring in as many dollars as they can in premiums and to pay out as few dollars as possible for your health care. That leaves families with rising premiums, rising co-pays, and fighting with insurance companies to try to get the health care that their doctors say that they and their children need. Medicare for All solves that problem. And I understand there are a lot of politicians who say, oh, it's just not possible, we just can't do it, have a lot of political reasons for this. What they're really telling you is they just won't fight for it. Well, health care is a basic human right, and I will fight for basic human rights.
Congressman O'Rourke, when you ran for Senate, you also praised a bill that would replace private insurance. This year, you're saying you're no longer sure. Can you explain why?
My goal is to ensure that every American is well enough to live to their full potential because they have health care. In Laredo, Texas, I met a young man, 27 years old, told me that he'd been to a doctor once in his life. And on that visit, he was told he had diabetes, he was told he had glaucoma, and he was told untreated because he doesn't have health care, he'll be dead before the age of 40. So getting to guaranteed, high-quality, universal health care as quickly and surely as possible has to be our goal. The ability to afford your prescriptions and go to a primary care provider, the ability to see a mental health care provider. In Texas, the single largest provider of mental health care services is the county jail system today. And healthcare also has to mean that every woman can make her own decisions about her own body and has access to the care that makes that possible. Our plan says that if you're uninsured, we enroll you in Medicare. If you're insufficiently insured, you can't afford your premiums, we enroll you in Medicare. But if you're a member of a union that negotiated for a health care plan that you like because it works for you and your family, you're able to keep it. We preserve choice by making sure that everybody has health care.
Time is up, Congressman, but I do want to ask a follow-up on this one. Just to be very clear, I'll give you 10 seconds. Would you replace private insurance?
No, I think that choice is fundamental to our ability to get everybody cared for.
Private insurance is not working for tens of millions of Americans. When you talk about the co-pays, the deductibles, the premiums, the out-of-pocket expenses, it's not working.
That's
How
right.
can you defend
for
the
those
system
for
that's
whom it is not working, they can choose Medicare. For the culinary workers in Nevada who I listen to, who negotiated for those plans,
for people.
They're able to keep them.
Why are you defending private insurance?
Say they like their private health insurance, by the way. It should be noted that 100 million Americans. I mean, I think we should be the party that keeps what's working and fixes what's broken. I mean, doesn't that make sense? I mean, we should give everyone in this country health care as a basic human right for free, full stop. But we should also give them the option to buy private insurance. Why do we have to stand for taking away something from people? And also, it's bad policy. If you go to every hospital in this country and you ask them one question, which is, how would it have been for you last year if every one of your bills were paid at the Medicare rate? Every single hospital administrator said they would close. And the Medicare for All bill requires payments to stay at current Medicare rates. So to some extent, we're basically supporting a bill that will have every hospital close. I mean, my dad was a union electrician. Right? I actually grew up in a working class family. He loved the health care that the IBEW gave him. And I just always think about my dad and anything I would do from a policy perspective. He'd look at me and he'd say, good job, John, for getting health care for every American. But why are you taking my health care
I've let this play out a little bit because I'm fascinated to hear the daylight between you. Congresswoman Gabbard, weigh in here.
I think we're talking about this in the wrong way. You're talking about one bill over another bill. Really what we're talking about is our objective, making sure that every single sick American in this country is able to get the health care that they need. I believe Medicare for All is the way to do that. I also think that employers will recognize how much money will be saved by supporting a Medicare for All program, a program that will reduce the administrative costs, reduce the bureaucratic costs, and make sure that everyone gets that quality health care that they need. I also think if you look at other countries in the world who have universal health care, every one of them has some form of a role of private insurance. I think that's what we've got to look at, taking the best of these ideas, but making sure unequivocally that no sick American goes without getting the care that they need, regardless of how much or little money they have in their pocket.
Congresswoman, thanks. Let me turn to Senator Booker on this. Senator Booker, explain to me where you are. This is hugely important to people, so tell us where you are.
I absolutely will. First of all, we're talking about this as a healthcare issue, but in communities like mine, low-income communities like mine, it's an education issue because kids who don't have health care are not going to succeed in school. It is an issue for jobs and employment because people that do not have good health care do not succeed at work. It's even a retirement issue because in my community, African Americans have a lower life expectancy because of poorer health care. And so where I stand is very clear. Health care is not just a human right, it should be an American right, and I believe the best way to get there is Medicare for All, but I have an urgency about this. When I am president of the United States, I'm not going to wait. We have to do the things immediately that are going to provide better care. And on this debate, I'm sorry, there are too many people profiteering off of the pain of people in America, from pharmaceutical companies to insurers. Literally, the overhead for insurers that they charge is 15%, while Medicare's overhead is only at 2%. We can do this better, and every single day I will be fighting to give people more access at more affordable costs until we get to my goal, which is every American having health care.
Time is up, Senator. I want to move back, if I can, to Congressman Gabbard.
And that is that the insurance companies last year alone sucked $23 billion in profits out of the healthcare system. $23 billion, and that doesn't count the money that was paid to executives, the money that was spent lobbying Washington. We have a giant industry that wants our healthcare system to stay the way it is, because it's not working for families, but it's sure as heck working for them. It's time for us to make families come first.
It should not be an option in the United States of America for any insurance company to deny women coverage for their exercise of their right of choice. And I am the only candidate here who has passed a law protecting a woman's right of reproductive health and health insurance. And I'm the only candidate who has passed a public option. And I respect everybody's goals and plans here. But we do have one candidate that's actually advanced the ball. And we got to have access for everyone. I've done it as a public option.
Senator Klobuchar, I want to get you.
That's a false claim.
I'm fascinated by this, Senator Klobuchar.
I just want to say there's 3 women up here that have fought pretty hard for a woman's right to choose. So I'll start with that. And then I just want to make very clear, I think we share the goal of universal health care. And the idea I put out there, the public option, which the governor was just talking about, this idea is that you use Medicare or Medicaid without any insurance companies involved. You could do it either way. And the estimates are 13 million people would see a reduction in their premiums. 12 more million people would get covered. So I think it is a beginning, and the way you start and the way you move to universal health care.
Secretary Castro, this one is for you. All of you on stage support a woman's right to an abortion. You all support some version of a government health care option. Would your plan cover abortion, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, it would. I don't believe only in reproductive freedom. I believe in reproductive justice. And what that means is that just because a woman, or let's also not forget someone in the trans community, a trans female, is poor, doesn't mean they shouldn't have the right to exercise that right to choose. And so I absolutely would cover the right to have an abortion. More than that, everybody in this crowd and watching at home knows that in our country today, a person's right to choose is under assault in places like Missouri, in Alabama, in Georgia. I would appoint judges to the federal bench that understand the precedent of Roe v. Wade and will respect it. And in addition to that, make sure that we fight hard as we transition our healthcare system to one where everybody can get and exercise that right.
Senator Warren, would you put limits on any limits on abortion?
I would make certain that every woman has access to the full range of reproductive health care services, and that includes birth control, it includes abortion, it includes everything for a woman. And I want to add on that, it's not enough for us to expect the courts to protect us. 47 years ago, Roe versus Wade was decided, and we've all looked to the courts all that time as state after state has undermined Roe, has put in exceptions, has come right up to the edge of taking away protection.
Your time is up, Senator.
We now have an America where most people support Roe versus Wade. We need to make that federal law.
Thank you. Jose?
Thank you. Senator Booker, I want to kind of come back on a discussion we were having about health and the opioid crisis. You represent a state where 14 of the 20 largest pharmaceutical companies are based. Should pharmaceutical companies that manufacture these drugs be held criminally liable for what they do?
They should absolutely be held criminally liable because they are liable and responsible. This is one of the reasons why, well before I was running for president, I said I would not take contributions from pharma companies, not take contributions from corporate PACs or pharma executives, because they are part of this problem. And this opioid addiction in our country, we in cities like mine have been seeing how we've tried to arrest our way out of addiction for too long. It is time that we have a national urgency to deal with this problem and make the solutions that are working to actually be the law of our land and make the pharmaceutical companies that are responsible help to pay for that.
Congressman O'Rourke, how would you deal with it?
Tonight in this country, you have 2.3 million of our fellow Americans behind bars. It's the largest prison population on the face of the planet. Many are there for nonviolent drug crimes, including possession of marijuana, at a time that more than half the states have legalized it or decriminalized it. And yet, despite what Purdue Pharma has done, their connection to the opioid crisis and the overdose deaths that we're seeing throughout this country, they've been able to act with complete impunity and pay no consequences, not a single night in jail. Unless there's accountability and justice, this crisis will continue. In my administration, we will hold them to account. We will make sure that they pay a price, and we will help those who've been victims of this malfeasance in this country, get them treatment and long-term care.
I know immigration is on a lot of your minds here, and I want to talk about it. We're going to talk about it in a moment. We need to take a break. We'll be back with more from Miami after this.
Ready? Okay, we are. We're here. Listen, so that was it out of the gate. The only thing I have to say right off the bat before I hand it to my panel.
Good evening, everyone. Breaking news tonight from Washington.
Lester Holt.
5 times.
So we know that they are favoring Elizabeth Warren.
Absolutely.
Fam, who else stood out to you other than Elizabeth Warren speaking 5 times?
I mean, I thought Tulsi answered the questions really well, the questions that she was given, because she was only given 2 questions and she had to butt in for one of them. But I actually want to talk more about the pandering that's going on,
Please
the
do.
way they've actually all copied Bernie Sanders' platform. I mean, I hear them using the same words, and it's not because it's just like they're saying great things. A lot of these people, that doesn't matter. You have to look at their record. You have to look at their policy. They can all say wonderful, beautiful things, but we really know who's pushing what legislation. That is what we have to look back. When Cory Booker's talking about Big Pharma, he's one of the people that gets the most money from Big Pharma.
Right.
So he's saying great
Right.
things, but he's taking money from Big Pharma. So please don't just take into account what these people are saying. Check it with what they do in their actions.
Well, I think what I said was needed to happen already happened in this first segment, and that is Elizabeth Warren was asked about Medicare for all. She was pressed about getting rid of the private health care industry, and she stood up to scrutiny. There is no way she could have been any clearer that she believes in Medicare for all, single payer, and getting rid of private insurance, and the way she railed against the insurance companies and how much money they were making. And she answered the question exactly the way I tweeted to somebody.
Okay,
Bernie
all right.
should.
We are going back. Good. We'll come to William when we get back from the commercial break.
We want to turn to an issue that has been in the news, especially this week. There are undocumented children being held alone in detention, even as close as Homestead, Florida, right here, less than 30 miles from where we are tonight. Fathers and mothers and children are dying while trying to enter the United States of America. We saw that image today that broke our hearts, and they had names. Oscar Martinez and his 23-month-old daughter Valeria died trying to cross the river to ask for asylum in this country. Last month, more than 130,000 migrants were apprehended at the southern border. Secretary Castro, if you were president today, hoy, what would you specifically do?
Thank you very much, Jose. I'm very proud that in April I became the first candidate to put forward a comprehensive immigration plan. And we saw those images. Watching that image of Oscar and his daughter Valeria is heartbreaking. It should also piss us all off. If I were president today, and it should spur us to action, if I were president today, I would sign an executive order that would get rid of Trump's zero tolerance policy, the Remain in Mexico policy, and the metering policy. This metering policy is basically what prompted Oscar and Valeria to make that risky swim across the river. They have been playing games with people who are coming and trying to seek asylum at our ports of entry. Oscar and Valeria went to a port of entry, And then they were denied the ability to make an asylum claim. So they got frustrated and they tried to cross the river and they died because of that.
On day one, sorry.
On day
I'm just
one,
gonna ask you
I
for
would do
30
that
seconds.
executive order that would address metering, and then I would follow that up in my first 100 days with immigration reform that would honor asylum claims, that would put undocumented immigrants, as long as they haven't committed a serious crime, on a pathway to citizenship, and then would go to the root cause of the issue, which is we need a Marshall Plan for Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador, so that people can find safety and opportunity at home instead of coming to the United States to seek it.
Senator Booker, what would you do on day one? And this is a situation that the next president will inherit.
Yes.
La situación ahora es inaceptable. Este presidente ha atacado, ha demonizado los inmigrantes. Es inaceptable y voy a cambiar este. On day one, I will make sure that, number one, we end the ICE policies and the customs and border policies that are violating the human rights. When people come to this country, they do not leave their human rights at the border. Number two, I will make sure that we reinstate DACA, that we reinstate pathways to citizenship for DACA recipients, and to make sure that people that are here on temporary protected status can stay and remain here. And then finally, we need to make sure that we address the issues that made Oscar and Valeria come in the first place by making major investments in the Northern Triangle, not like this president is doing, by ripping away the resources we need to actually solve this problem. We cannot surrender our values and think that we're going to get border security. We actually will lose security and our values. We must fight for both.
I'll say, if I might, very briefly, and this is an important point, my plan, and I'm glad to see that Senator Booker, Senator Warren, and Governor Inslee agree with me on this. My plan also includes getting rid of Section 1325 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, to go back to the way we used to treat this when somebody comes across the border, not to criminalize desperation, to treat that as a civil violation. And here's why it's important. We see all of this horrendous family separation. They use that law, Section 1325, to justify under the law separating little children from their families.
Jose,
and so I want to challenge every single candidate on this stage to support the repeal of Section 1325.
30 seconds.
As my friend here said, I agree with him on that issue, but folks should understand that the separation of children from families doesn't just go on at our border. It happens in our communities as ICE are ripping away parents from their American children, spouses and the like, and are creating fear in cities all across this country where parents are afraid to even drop their kids off to school or go to work. We must end those policies as well.
Discussion about immigration in this country, because look at the bottom line here. That tragic photo of that parent, that child, and I'm saying this as a father. Every American should feel that in their heart, and every American should say, that is not America, those are not our values, but we have to get under the skin of why we have this crisis in our system, because we're not being honest about the division that's been fomented in this country. The way that American citizens have been told that immigrants somehow created their misery and their pain and their challenges. For all the American citizens out there who feel you're falling behind, who feel the American dream's not working for you, the immigrants didn't do that to you. The big corporations did that to you. The 1% did that to you. We need to be the party of working people, and that includes a party of immigrants. But first, we have to tell working people in America who are hurting that we're going to be on their side every single time against those big corporations who created this mess to begin with. And remind people we're all in this together. If we don't change that debate, that politics that's holding us back, we won't get all these reforms people are talking about. That's what we need to do as Democrats.
Congresista, if I could, I'm sorry. Congresista O'Rourke, ¿qué haría usted en el primer día, si usted es presidente, sobre esta realidad que está ocurriendo? What would you do, Congressman, day one at the White House?
Vamos a tratar cada persona con el respeto y dignidad que merecen como humanos. We would not turn back Valeria and her father, Oscar. We would accept them into this country and follow our own asylum laws. We would not build walls. We would not put kids in cages. In fact, we would spare no expense to reunite the families that have been separated already. And we would not criminally prosecute any family who is fleeing violence and persecution. We would make sure...
Secretary, let him finish, and I will give you...
His policy
but let him finish, please. Yes.
We would not detain any family fleeing violence, in fact, fleeing the deadliest countries on the face of the planet today. We would implement a family case management program so they could be cared for in the community at a fraction of the cost. And then we would rewrite our immigration laws in our own image, free dreamers forever from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens here in this country, invest in solutions in Central America, work with regional stakeholders so there's no reason to make that 2,000-mile journey to this country.
Secretary, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Let's be very clear. The reason that they're separating these little children from their families is that they're using Section 1325 of that act, which criminalizes coming across the border, to incarcerate the parents and then separate them. Some of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not. And I want to challenge all of the candidates to do that. I just think it's a mistake, Bethel. I think it's a mistake. And I think that if you truly want to change the system, then we got to repeal that section. If not, then it might as well be the same policy.
Let me respond to this very briefly. Actually, as a member of Congress, I helped to introduce legislation that would ensure that we don't criminalize those who are seeking asylum and refuge in this country. If you're fleeing desperation, then I want to make sure that you're treated with respect.
I'm still talking about everybody else.
But you're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
That's not true.
And if we do that, I don't think it's asking too much for people to follow our laws when they come to this country.
I'm talking about millions of folks. A lot of folks that are coming are not seeking asylum. A lot of them are undocumented immigrants, right? And you said recently that the reason you didn't want to repeal Section 1325 was because you were concerned about human trafficking and drug trafficking. But let me tell you what. Section 18, Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Title 21, and Title 22 already cover human trafficking and drug trafficking. I think that you should do your homework on this issue. If you did your homework on this issue, you would know that we should repeal this section.
This is an issue that we should and could be talking about for a long time, and we will for a long time.
Can we talk about the conditions to why people are coming here?
Let's let Lester.
Because
Savannah. I know it's just we could go on.
But rather than talk about specific provisions, we really have to talk about why these people are coming to our country and what are we going to do to actually make a difference in these countries.
Congressman, you'll get your chance. Let's continue the discussion. Senator Klobuchar, let's talk about what Secretary Castro just said. He wants to no longer have it be a crime to illegally cross the border. Do you support that? Do you think it should be a civil offense only? And if so, do you worry about potentially incentivizing people to come here?
Immigrants, they do not diminish America. They are America. And I am happy to look at his proposal, but I do think you want to make sure that you have provisions in place that allow you to go after traffickers and allow you to go after people who are violating the law. What I really think we need to step back and talk about is the economic imperative here. And that is that 70 of our Fortune 500 companies are headed up by people that came from other countries. 25% of our U.S. Nobel laureates were born in other countries. We have a situation right now where we need workers in our fields and in our factories. We need them to start small businesses. We need their ideas. And this president has literally gone backwards at a time where our economy needs immigrants. And so my proposal is to look at that 2013 bill that passed the Senate with Republican support, to upgrade that bill, to make it as good as possible and get it done. It brings the debt down by $158 billion. It gives a path to citizenship for people who can become citizens. And it would be so much better for our economy in America.
That's time. Thank you. Congressman Ryan, same question. Should it be a crime to illegally cross the border, or should it be a civil offense only?
Well, I agree with Secretary Castro. I think there are other provisions in the law that will allow you to prosecute people for coming over here if they're dealing in drugs and other things. That's already established in the law. So there's no need to repeat it. And I think it's abhorrent. We're talking about this father who got killed with his daughter. And the issues here, the way these kids are being treated, if you go to Guantanamo Bay, there are terrorists that are held that get better health care than those kids that have tried to cross the border in the United States. That needs to stop. And I think the president should immediately ask doctors and nurses to go immediately down to the border and start taking care of these kids. What kind of country are we running here where we have a president of the United States who's so focused on hate and fear and division? And what has happened now, the end result, is now we've got kids literally laying in their own snot with 3-week-old diapers that haven't been changed. We've got to tell this president that is not a sign of strength, Mr. President. That is a sign of weakness.
Senator Booker, I'll go to you. But no, a lot of people, Jose asked the question, if you're president on day one, what will you do with the fact that you will have families here? There's been a lot of talk about what you'll do in the first 100 days, about legislation. What will you actually do with these families? How will you care for them? Will they be detained or will they not be?
Well, this is a related and brief point, because what we're talking about, what Secretary Castro and I are talking about, is that we have the power to better deal with this problem through the civil process than the criminal process. I have been to some of the largest private prisons, which are repugnant to me, that people are profiting off incarceration and their immigration lockups. Our country has made so many mistakes by criminalizing things, whether it's immigration, whether it's mental illness, whether it's addiction. We know that this is not the way to deal with problems. There is a humane way that affirms human rights and human dignity and actually solve this problem. Donald Trump isn't solving this problem. We've seen under his leadership a surge at our border. We solve this problem by making investments in the Northern Triangle to stop the reasons why people are being driven here in the first place. And we make sure we use our resources to provide health care, to affirm the values and human dignity of the people that come here, because we cannot sacrifice our values, our ideals as a nation for border security. We can have both by doing this the right way.
All right, Senator, thank you. Let me go to Governor Inslee on this. What would you do on day one? Same question I just asked Cory Booker. I have yet to hear an answer from anyone on this stage. What will you do with the families that will be here?
There is no reason for the detention and separation of these children. They should be released pending their hearings, and they should have a hearing and the law should be followed. That's what should happen. And we should do what we're doing in Washington State. I'm proud that we've passed a law that prevents local law enforcement from being turned into mini ICE agents. I'm proud to have been the first governor to stand up against Donald Trump's heinous Muslim ban. I'm proud to be a person who's not only talked about Dreamers, but being one of the first to make sure that they get a college education so that they can realize their dreams. These are some of the most inspirational people in our state. And I'll leave you with this thought if you want to know what I think. Donald Trump the other day tried to threaten me. He thought it was a threat to tell me that he would send refugees in Washington State if we passed the law that I passed. And I told him that's not a threat at all. We welcome refugees into our state. We recognize diversity as a strength. This is how we've built America. That tradition is going to continue if I'm president of the United States.
We're going to switch to another topic now. We've got a lot to get through. Let's talk.
My grandfather was actually separated from his family when he came to this country.
We're going to talk about Iran right now because we're working against the clock. Tankers have been attacked. A U.S. drone has been shot down. There have been disturbing threats issued by both the U.S. and Iranian leadership. I'd like, if you can, just for a moment, to put aside how you think we may have gotten here. But what I want to know is, how do you dial it back? So a show of hands, who as president would sign on to the 2015 nuclear deal as it was originally negotiated? Well, Senator Booker, why not?
May I address that? First and foremost, it was a mistake to pull out of that deal. And one of the reasons why we're seeing this hostility now is because Donald Trump is marching us to a far more dangerous situation. Literally, he took us out of a deal that gave us transparency into their nuclear program and pushed back a nuclear breakout 10, 20 years. And now we see Iran threatening to go further, and we're being pulled in further and further into this crisis. We need to renegotiate and get back into a deal, but I'm not going to have a primary platform to say unilaterally I'm going to rejoin that deal, because when I'm president of the United States, I'm going to do the best I can to secure this country and that region and make sure that if I have an opportunity to leverage a better deal, I'm going to do it.
All right, Senator Klobuchar, I'd like you to answer that question, because you said you would negotiate yourself back into the Iranian agreement. Can you argue that nuclear pact, as it was ratified, was a good deal?
Yes, it was.
It was imperfect, but it was a good deal for that moment. I would have worked to get longer sunset periods, and that's something we could negotiate to get back in the deal. But the point is, Donald Trump told us when he got out of it that he was going to give us a better deal. Those were his words. And now we are a month away from the Iranians who claim now that they're going to blow the caps on enriching uranium. And the Iranians have told us this. And so that's where we are right now. He has made us less safe than we were when he became president. So what I would do is negotiate us back into that agreement, is stand with our allies and not give unlimited leverage to China and Russia, which is what he has done. And then, finally, I would make sure that if there is any possibility of a conflict, and we're having this debate in Congress right now, that he comes to Congress for an authorization of military force. I would do that. And this president is literally every single day 10 minutes away from going to war, one tweet away from going to war, and I don't think we should conduct foreign policy in our bathrobe at 5 in the morning, which is what he does.
Congresswoman Gabbard, you've said you would sign back onto the 2015 deal. Would you insist, though, that it address Iran's support for Hezbollah?
Let's deal with the situation where we are, where this president and his chicken hawk cabinet have led us to the brink of war with Iran. I served in the war in Iraq at the height of the war in 2005, a war that took over 4,000 of my brothers and sisters in uniforms lives. The American people need to understand that this war with Iran would be far more devastating, far more costly than anything that we ever saw in Iraq. It would take many more lives. It would exacerbate the refugee crisis. And it wouldn't be just contained within Iran. This would turn into a regional war. This is why it's so important that every one of us, every single American, stand up and say, no war with Iran. We need to get back into the Iran nuclear agreement, and we need to negotiate how we can improve it. It was an imperfect deal. There are issues like their missile development that needs to be addressed. We can do both simultaneously to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon and preventing us from going to war.
Time is up, and I have just a very quick follow-up. Well, what would your red line be for military action against Iran?
Look, obviously, if there was an attack against the our troops, then there would have to be a response. But my point is, and it's important for us to recognize this, is Donald Trump and his cabinet, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, and others, are creating a situation that just a spark would light off a war with Iran, which is incredibly dangerous. That's why we need to de-escalate tensions. Trump needs to get back into the Iran nuclear deal and swallow his pride, put the American people first.
Hey, but wait a minute.
All right, we are out of time, and we're up against a hard break, but we will have much more. Mayor de Blasio will have more. The commercial is coming. We will continue our questioning next with Chuck Todd, Rachel Maddow. Stick around. We'll have a lot more with some very anxious candidates just ahead.
William Moses Somerville. I can't say his name right. Please.
Say William Somerville.
Thank you. I like that too.
How about William Moses?
Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Tell us what happened.
I'm losing it over here.
All right.
Okay. This problem with the immigration issue is just scattered all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. This is where I really expected for Tulsi Gabbard to really kick in gear, because the reason why we have an immigration problem in America is because of the foreign policies that we pursue here in everyday life in other countries. So stop destabilizing other countries.
Thank you, Jesus. Yes.
Oh, God.
She should have butt in there.
I mean, we're trying to, so we don't want to go to Iran. Right. Let's not destabilize that country, but let's not create ourselves to be attacked. We're about to do intervention in Venezuela. Get the hell out of Venezuela. We don't want to get in Venezuela's business. Like really, people.
You see the way the mainstream media kept us there, though?
Exactly.
The mainstream media just wouldn't let John Delaney go there. They wouldn't get it in Tulsi Gabbard. And then they also tried to corner her with the Hezbollah situation.
Which I would like to hear her answer on. Not that I think it's the real thing.
Why is she singled out over there for that?
Well, I understand, but the thing is, they know what the gotcha questions are going to be, and they have to have an answer. Now, de Blasio was coming on strong. I thought that he was adopting a very good program, but he didn't answer the question right. He said, yes, the 70% of the Democratic Party should have no, I'm sorry. Democratic Party should support 70% tax rate. They should support free college. And he wasn't saying that he supported that. So that was kind of confusing. And then he said the immigrants didn't do it, corporations did it.
Well, that
and
was
he's
good.
Wrong.
Right.
But he's wrong.
But that's a good sound piece.
No, the immigrants didn't do it, but it's our foreign policy that did it. Specifically what Hillary did by supporting the coup in
2009,
Honduras
yes.
and overthrowing the democratically elected president Zelaya.
Yep.
Right. So real quick. So to your point, not to say that corporations did it, but but in light of our foreign policy, then corporations jump in to say, okay, well, we really want to welcome immigration reform when it's not about really welcoming people, it's about welcoming exploited labor. That's the problem.
Absolutely. And
that's the problem. Oh gosh, let's get it together. Come on, people.
I'm wondering after this commercial break if Beto, Tim Ryan, instantly will even be back up on stage. I need to be there.
Are you even
that
here?
Hook, they can take the hook.
We talked about Beto. I think Beto is just and the Spanish, the pandering with the Spanish. I know Johnny. I saw him over there almost throwing the computer across the room when this guy stop speaking Spanish.
No.
Seriously, I don't need to hear how badly you speak.
Somebody right, exactly. You really speak really bad Spanish. Like if you don't speak Spanish.
Wait, let me just make a point. How tone deaf is Delaney when he says the private insurance is working for people? That's because he can afford. He's worth $246 million. He can afford his premiums, co-pays, and deductibles.
And at least he's being honest, though. At least he's being about himself, whatnot. And he wanted to talk a little bit about intervention. He was in that. I mean, and I respect that more than some of these people like Cory Booker, who's just giving you platitudes after platitudes. But once again, I said he was going to be my long shot to come in there and make a name for himself. Right. And I think de Blasio and Julio and Castro have done themselves well. And the other ones, bleh.
Yeah, and I'm still waiting to see somebody okay, Cory Booker hints at African Americans, but it's like, you can incorporate a comprehensive reparations package here, partner. You can talk about that. Carry on.
We'll see if they ask about
So we want to remind you people
I'm most certain they will not ask about reparations.
But 1 second. I think they will ask about reparations. Second half, we'll take a look. Go over to the Convo Couch YouTube, Lauren Steiner's Facebook. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you from the MCSC Network. And remember, we're going to have a post-game after. We'll see you in the next commercial break. Fiorella will start that one off.
And welcome back, everyone, to the first Democratic presidential debate from the Arch Center in Miami.
And as we continue the questioning, time to get more members of our team in the mix.
So right now, let's turn it over to Chuck Todd and Rachel Maddow. Take it away.
Thanks, Jose. All right, we're going to start by recapping the rules. 20 candidates qualified for this first Democratic debate. We're going to hear from 10 tonight, 10 more tomorrow. The breakdown for each night was selected at random. Now, the candidates will have 60 seconds to answer, 30 seconds for a follow-up if necessary, and we will be ruthless if necessary.
Yeah, we can do that. By the way, hi, Rachel.
Hi, Chuck.
How you doing?
Good.
And we've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to be talking about guns and climate here up top. A whole lot more in this hour. Obviously, because of the size of the field, not every person will be able to weigh in on everything, but over the course of this next hour, we will hear from everyone. I promise everybody. And to begin with, we're going to go with guns. And Senator Warren, I want to start with you. We are less than 50 miles from Parkland, Florida, where 17 people were killed in a school shooting last year, and where there has been significant activism on gun violence ever since. Many of you are calling for a restoration of an assault weapons ban. But even if implemented, there will still be hundreds of millions of guns in this country. Should there be a role for the federal government?
Their mics are on.
Everybody's mics are on. I think we have I heard that too. That's okay. I think we had a little mic issue in the back.
Control room, we've got contrary
I think
audio.
we heard, yeah, we have the audience audio. All right. So the question is simply this. We're from, I apologize you guys didn't get to hear this, the first part of the question. Obviously, we're not far from Parkland, Florida. Gun activism has become a big part of high school life up there in Broward County. Many of you are calling for tighter gun restrictions. Some of you are calling for the restoration of the assault weapons ban. But even if it's put in place, there's still going to be perhaps hundreds of millions of guns still on the streets. Is there a role for the federal government in order to get these guns off the streets?
What's happening?
We are hearing our colleagues' audio. If the control room could turn off the mics.
Y'all are trying to be the news.
Yeah, if the control room could turn off the mics of our previous moderators, we will.
I think it's the prior moderators.
You know, we prepared for everything.
Guess what, guys?
We did not prepare for this.
We are going to take a quick break. We're going to get this technical situation fixed. We will be right back.
Fee?
Okay, so Fiorella, we don't have, unlike MSNBC, the CONVO College Broadcast Opposition has a great production team, and our microphones are working. Fiorella, let's get back to what we talked about. Johnny Tsunami, great job. Fiorella,
Yeah.
who do you think needs to go away in this crowd?
Dude, Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke is like stuttering. He's not really saying much. He can't even debate right when he's being accused by Castro of not going far enough. He's making Julian Castro look so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Beto's done after this. Beto's absolutely, to me, done after this.
I feel bad for him. I read a really long think piece about him that said that he really doesn't like this kind of politicking. You know, he went into office in El Paso because he wanted to solve a problem. Now, we can debate about what happened with him in Congress and how he voted with Trump 70% of the time and how he's really a moderate. We can talk about all that stuff. But in this article, I read that he really didn't like having to fundraise. He was shocked that he had to spend 70% of his time fundraising. He really likes being out talking to people.
Can I say something about that real quick, though, Lauren? If he didn't like that, then why is he taking the corporate money and taking that fossil fuel money? If he doesn't like the fundraise, then do what Bernie and Tulsi do. Right. Get your grassroots supports and get going. If you don't like doing that, then get the hell out of there. Wow. Sorry to interrupt.
Carry on.
Please, no, go say something. Well, you were saying something.
No, you're talking about
Beto.
Yeah.
The Spanish-speaking guy on stage.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, you know, I feel bad for him because he's in over his head on this stage.
Big
he
time.
should not have run for president. He should have run for Senate against Cornyn. And of course, I support Sima Hernandez. So let's get a big plug for Sima.
Sima, sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. They say for the second round they have to have 130,000 donors. Do they?
No, that's the third.
That's the third one, right? The second one was 65, right?
We're still going to see these 20 clowns, all 20 of them.
I don't think so.
Decide to drop.
I think a lot of them are going to decide to drop.
Somebody needs, at least 3 people need to drop.
Yeah. Ryan's got to go. Right. Tim Ryan has no presence up there whatsoever. From Ohio. I mean, I like his mentality, and then he just goes after Trump. I think Klobuchar's got to get out of the way, even though she made some points today.
Bellini needs to get out of the way.
Well, I mean,
what's the other guy? Illness? Is that his name?
Inslee. He needs to go. I got him on the list. The only big name I got getting out of here is, I mean, I don't want to say Klobuchar's a big name, but is Beto. I think he's just one. Like, if he doesn't like this, and it's obvious, Lauren, he should just drop out at this point. And he's got Buttigieg on the other side. There, you know, I think he got lucky that Buttigieg wasn't on the stage today because I thought Mayor Pete would go after him because they feel like they're peeling off each other's votes. But these people need to go. I think Julian Castro and de Blasio have done themselves some good to keep themselves going on even further, and even the bullshit on Cory Booker. But what I think is important for the grassroots people watching this show is to go back and find something and call these people out. Right. Well, when Cory Booker's going to say something and he stands for something, let's show the bill that he was against. Well, we have to litter the internet and call these people on their bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Cory Booker. I mean, I just think it is the height of chutzpah. And for those of you out there who don't know Yiddish words, it means some nerve for him to specify corporate consolidation when he supported Bain Capital, which does corporate consolidation.
Exactly.
And he talks about pharmaceutical companies when he voted against the bill to lower Bernie's bill to lower prescription drug costs. And then when he was called out on it, he came up with some bullshit excuse about they're not safe.
We would call that Meshuggah, which is crazy. We're going back to the debates.
We believe we have the technical difficulties fixed.
Never say that.
Never say never, but we will march forward here, and I will lean forward here a little bit. Senator Warren, we're going to get to the gun question here. Parkland, Florida, It's just north of here in Broward County. As you know, it has created a lot of teenage activism on the gun issue. It has inspired a lot of you to come out with more robust plans to deal with guns, including assault weapons ban. But even if you're able to implement that, what do you do about the hundreds of millions of guns already out there? And does the federal government have to play a role in dealing with it?
So in this period of time that I've been running for president, I've had more than 100 town halls. I've taken more than 2,000 unfiltered questions. And the single hardest question I've gotten, I got one from a little boy and I got one from a little girl. And that is to say, when you're president, how are you going to keep us safe? That's our responsibility as adults. 7 children will die today from gun violence, children and teenagers. And they won't just die in mass shootings. They'll die on sidewalks, they'll die in playgrounds, they'll die in people's backyards. Gun violence is a national health emergency in this country, and we need to treat it like that. So what can we do? We can do the things that are sensible. We can do the universal background checks. We can ban the weapons of war. But we can also double down on the research and find out what really works, where it is that we can make the differences at the margins that will keep our children safe. We need to treat this like the virus that's killing our children.
You didn't address, do you think the federal government needs to go and figure out a way to get the guns that are already out there?
What I think we need to do is we need to treat it like a serious research problem, which we have not done. You know, guns in the hands of a collector who's had them for decades, who's never fired them, who takes safety seriously, that's very different from guns that are sold and turned over quickly. We can't treat this as an across-the-board problem. We have to treat it like a public health emergency. That means bring data to bear, and it means make real change in this country, whether it's politically popular or not.
Senator Booker, you have a program.
We need to fight for our children.
Senator Booker, you have a federal government buyback program in your plan. How is that going to work?
Well, first of all, I want to say my colleague and I both have been hearing this on the campaign trail. But what's even worse is I hear gunshots in my neighborhood. I think I'm the only one, I hope I'm the only one on this panel here that had 7 people shot in their neighborhood just last week. Someone I knew, Shahad Smith, was killed with an assault rifle at the top of my block last year. For millions of Americans, this is not a policy issue. This is an urgency. And for those who have not been directly affected, they're tired of living in a country where their kids go to school to learn about reading, writing, and arithmetic, and how to deal with an active shooter in their school. This is something that I'm tired of, and I'm tired of hearing people, all they have to offer is thoughts and prayers. In my faith, people say faith without works is dead. So we will find a way. But the reason we have a problem right now is we've let the corporate gun lobby frame this debate. It is time that we have bold actions and a bold agenda. I will get that done as President of the United States because this is not about policy, this is personal.
Thank you, Senator Booker.
Secretary Castro, I'd like to talk to you about something that Senator Booker just mentioned there, the idea of active shooter drills in schools. As school shootings seem like an almost every day or every week occurrence now, they don't make a complete news cycle anymore, no matter the death toll. As parents are so afraid as their kids go off to school that their kids will be caught up in something like this, next to nothing has changed in federal law that might affect the prevalence of school shootings. Is this a problem that is going to continue to get worse over our lifetimes, or is there something that you would do as president that you really think would turn it around?
Yeah, Rachel, I'm the dad of a 10-year-old girl, Karina, who's here tonight. And the worst thing is knowing that your child might be worried about what could happen at school, a place that's supposed to be safe. The answer to your question is no, we don't have to accept that. And I believe that on January 20th, 2021, at 12:01 p.m., we're going to have a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. The activists of Parkland, folks from Moms Demand, who have risen up across the United States and inspired so many people. You know, we may not have seen yet legislative action, but we're getting closer. The House took a vote In the Senate, the question often is if the decision is between 60 votes, a filibuster, or passing common sense gun reform, I'm going to choose common sense gun reform. So I believe that we're going to be able to get that done in 2021.
Secretary Castro, thank you.
Rachel, I have something to add to this briefly.
We'll give you 30 seconds for follow-up on that question, on that answer from Secretary Castro. Congressman Ryan.
You're talking about in the schools. These kids are traumatized. I support all the gun reforms here. We need to start dealing with the trauma that our kids have. We need trauma-based care in every school. We need social and emotional learning in every school. 90% of the shooters who do school shootings come from the school they're in, and 73% of them feel shamed, traumatized, or bullied. We need to make sure that these kids feel connected to the school. That means a mental health counselor in every single school in the United States. We need to start playing offense. If our kids are so traumatized that they're getting a gun and going into our schools, we're doing something wrong too, and we need reform around trauma-based care.
Congressman O'Rourke, you're a Texan who's you campaigned all over the state in 2018 in the most conservative parts there. What do you tell a gun owner who may agree with you on everything else? Okay, but says, you know what, the Democrats, if I vote for them in there, they're going to take my gun away. And even though I agree with you on all these other issues, how do you have that conversation?
Here's how we had that conversation in Texas. I shared with them what I learned from those students who survived the Santa Fe High School shooting. A young student named Bree, her friend Marcel, who survived another shooting, the mother of a victim who lost her life, Rhonda Hart. They talked about universal background checks where you close every loophole. We know that they save lives. Talked about ending the sales of assault weapons into our communities. Those weapons of war were designed to kill people as effectively and as efficiently as possible. They should belong on the battlefield and not in our communities. Red flag laws so that if someone poses a danger to themselves or to someone else, they're stopped before it's too late. And what I found in each one of those 254 counties is that Democrats and independents and Republicans, gun owners and non-gun owners alike agreed. But this effort must be led by the young people that you referenced at the beginning of this issue. Those students from Marjory Stoneman Douglas led the charge here in Florida, and they've been able to change those laws. They're making our democracy work, ensuring that our values and our interests and our priorities are reflected in the laws that we pass.
Thank you, Congressman O'Rourke. Hang on. Let me give 30 seconds. Senator Klobuchar, the Iron Range. I'm curious. Gun confiscation, right? If the government is buying back, how do you not have that conversation?
Well, that's not confiscation. You would give them the offer to buy back their gun. But I'll say this. I look at these proposals and I say, does this hurt my Uncle Dick and his deer stand, coming from a proud hunting and fishing state? These proposals don't do that. When I was a prosecutor, I supported the assault weapon ban. When I was in the Senate, I saw those moms from Sandy Hook come and try to advocate for change, and we all failed. And then now these Parkland kids from Florida, they started literally a national shift. You know why? It's just like with gay marriage. When kids talk to their parents and their grandparents, they say, I don't understand why we can't put these sensible things in place. Say, listen. And if we get bested by a bunch of 17-year-olds, it's the best thing that ever happened.
Thank you.
We need to get
Senator, thank you.
Senator Booker, let me go to you on another matter, actually. Senator Mitch McConnell says that his most consequential achievement as Senate Majority Leader was preventing President Obama from filling a Supreme Court seat. Having served with Republicans on the Judiciary Committee, do you believe they would confirm your court nominees?
I'm going to use 20 of my seconds just to say there's one thing we don't all agree with when it comes to guns, and I think it's common sense, and over 70% of Americans agree with me. If you need a license to drive a car, you should need a license to buy and own a firearm. And not everybody in this field agrees with that, but in states like Connecticut that did that, they saw 40% drops in gun violence and 15% drops in suicides. We need to start having bold agendas on guns. When it comes to the Supreme Court, very clearly, I agree with my friend, Secretary Castro, we are going to get to 50 votes in the Senate. This is a team sport. Whoever is our nominee needs to campaign in places like South Carolina because we can elect Jamie Harrison. They need to campaign in places like Iowa because we can win a Senate seat there. This is about getting us back to having 50 votes in the Senate and more so that we can not only balance the Supreme Court, but start to pass an aggressive agenda that, frankly, isn't so aggressive because most of America agrees with the policy objectives of our party.
Mayor de Blasio, I want to go to you on this for a follow-up. Mayor de Blasio, you're using we have to actually... Congressman Delaney, you'll have some time in a moment on this issue.
Is related
Congressman Delaney, I'll give you some time in a moment. Mayor de Blasio, as an executive in the largest city in this country, you are used to saying what you want to have happen and having it happen. If you nominate a Supreme Court nominee as President of the United States and Mitch McConnell is still Senate Majority Leader, what makes you believe that he would allow you to make a nominee?
Rachel, I am chief executive of the nation's largest city, and I also want to just say something quick on the gun issue and come to your question. Look, I run the largest police force in America, too, and if we're going to stop these shootings, we're going to get these guns off the street, we have to have a very different relationship between our police and our community. I also want to say there's something that sets me apart from all my colleagues running in this race, and that is for the last 21 years, I've been raising a black son in America. And I have had to have very, very serious talks with my son Dante about how to protect himself on the streets of our city and all over this country, including how to deal with the fact that he has to take special caution because there have been too many tragedies between our young men and our police, too, as we saw recently in Indiana. So we need to have a different conversation in this country about guns, but also a different conversation about policing that brings police and community together. We've done that in New York City, and we've driven down crime while we've done it. But to your question about Mitch McConnell, there's a political solution that we have to come to grips with. If the Democratic Party would stop acting like the party of the elites and be the party of working people again and go into states, including red states, to convince people we're on their side, we can put pressure on their senators to actually have to vote for the nominees that are put forward. Decent jurists deserve that right.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio.
Senator Warren, I'm going to get you. I will get you 30 seconds. I promise. Let me get this question. We're trying. I know you guys. We got other issues we're trying to get to, including a big one coming up in a minute. But Senator Warren, I want to continue on the Mitch McConnell thing because you have a lot of ambitious plans. You have a plan for that. Okay. We talked about the Supreme Court. Do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell if you don't beat him in the Senate? If he's still sitting there as the Senate Majority Leader, it's very plausible you be elected president with a Republican Senate. Do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell?
I do. We are a democracy, and the way a democracy is supposed to work is the will of the people matters. Now, we for far too long have had a Congress in Washington that has just completely dismissed what people care about across this country. They have made this country work much better for those who can make giant contributions, made it work better for those who hire armies of lobbyists and lawyers, and not made it work for the people. Well, here's how I see this happening. Number one, sure, I want to see us get a Democratic majority in the Senate. But short of a Democratic majority in the Senate, you better understand, the fight still goes on. It starts in the White House, and it means that everybody we energize in 2020 stays on the front lines come January 2021. We have to push from the outside, have leadership from the inside, and make this Congress reflect the will of the people.
I'm going to get a couple of you in here. I'm going to get you a couple in here. 30 seconds. Congressman Delaney, you seem to believe you can do everything in a bipartisan manner. Mitch McConnell doesn't operate that way. He operates differently. Why do you think he is going to conform to your style?
I think we need to get things done. That's why I believe we need to operate in a bipartisan manner. Listen, I'll sign into law bills that come to the White House that are passed on a party line basis, absolutely. But all the big transformative things we've ever done in this country's history have happened when huge majorities of the American people get behind them, which is why we need real solutions, not impossible promises. We need to put forth ideas that work, whether it's on health care, creating universal health care so that every American gets health care, but not running on making private insurance illegal. The gun issue is related. The gun safety issue is related because I can't tell you how many times I've been with folks in Western Maryland, and they've said to me, you know, Democrats don't do anything for us, Republicans don't do anything for us. You fight all the time, so they vote on that single issue. If we become the party of getting things done for the American people with real solutions, not impossible promises, we'll be able to get all these things done.
I promise 2 30s here. I'm going to say, Senator Booker, 30 seconds. How do you deal with Mitch McConnell? You've been in the Senate. You can't get bills on the floor right now with Mitch McConnell. Presidents can't do it. Is President Booker going to get his bills on the floor with Senator McConnell?
You know, when I got to the United States Senate, going back to what de Blasio said, as an African-American man in an African-American dominated community, I knew one of the biggest issues was criminal justice reform. From police accountability to dealing with the fact that we have a nation that has more African-Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves in 1850. And when I got to the Senate, people told me we could not get a comprehensive criminal justice reform bill done. And as my colleagues in the Senate know, I fought on that bill from the day I got to the Senate, built coalitions across the aisle, and today we passed the First Step Act. It's not as far as I want to go, but thousands of people will be liberated. I've taken on tough problems people said we cannot achieve, and I've been able to get things accomplished.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Rachel's got the next question.
Hold on, Governor, you're going to be happy with where we go. Governor Inslee, this next question is to you. You got me? Rachel. You got me? You have staked your candidacy on the issue of climate change. It is first, second, and third priority for you. You said it's all the issues. Let's get specific. We're here in Miami, which is already experiencing serious flooding on sunny days as a result of sea level rise. Parts of Miami Beach and the Keys could be underwater in our lifetimes. Does your plan save Miami?
Yes, first by taking away the filibuster from Mitch McConnell to start with. We have to do that. Look at, we are the first generation to feel the sting of climate change, and we are the last that can do something about it. Our towns are burning, our fields are flooding, Miami is inundated. And we have to understand, this is a climate crisis, an emergency, and it is our last chance in the administration next one to do something about it. And we need to do what I've done in my state. We've passed a 100% clean electrical grid bill. We now have a vision statement, and my plan has been called the gold standard of putting people to work. But the most important thing on this, and the biggest decision for the American public, is who's going to make this the first priority. And I am the candidate and the only one who's saying this has to be the top priority of the United States, the organizing principle to mobilize the United States so that we can do what we've always done, lead the world and invent the future and put 8 million people to work.
Governor,
that's what we're going to do.
Governor,
Congressman O'Rourke, you've also put out a big climate change plan from your campaign. You want some big changes in a pretty short period of time, including switching to renewable energy, pushing to replace gas-powered cars in favor of electric ones. What's your message to a voter who supports the overall goal of what you're trying to do, but suddenly feels as if government's telling them how to live and ordering them how to live? What is that balance like?
I think you've got to bring everybody in to the decisions and the solutions to the challenges that we face. That's why we're traveling everywhere, listening to everyone. We were in Pacific Junction, a town that had never meaningfully flooded before, just up against the Missouri River in Iowa. And every home in that community had flooded. There were farms just outside of Pacific Junction that were effectively lakes. Those farmers already underwater in debt. Their markets closed to them by a trade war under this administration, and now they don't know what to do. We, in our administration, are going to fund resiliency in those communities, in Miami, in Houston, Texas, those places that are on the front lines of climate change today. We're going to mobilize $5 trillion in this economy over the next 10 years. We're going to free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, and we're going to put farmers and ranchers in the driver's seat, renewable and sustainable agriculture to make sure that we capture more carbon out of the air and keep more of it in the soil, paying farmers for the environmental services that they want to provide. If all of us does all that we can, then we're going to be able to keep this planet from warming another 2 degrees Celsius and ensure that we match what this country can do and live up to our promise and our potential.
30 seconds, Secretary Castro. Who pays for the mitigation to climate, whether it's building seawalls, for people that are perhaps living in places that they shouldn't be living? Is this a federal government issue that needs to do that? Do they have to move these people? What do you do about that where maybe they're building a house someplace that isn't safe? Who pays to build that house? And how much should the government be bailing them out?
Well, I don't think that represents the vast majority of the issue. In fact, my first visit after I announced my candidacy wasn't to Iowa or New Hampshire, it was to San Juan, Puerto Rico. because people should know that if I'm elected president, everybody will count. And, I'm one of the few candidates in this race with executive experience, with a track record of getting things done. When I was mayor of San Antonio, we moved our local public utility. We began to shift it from coal-fired plants to solar and other renewables, and also created more than 800 jobs doing that. And when I was HUD secretary, we worked on the National Disaster Resilience Competition to invest in communities that were trying to rebuild from natural disasters in a sustainable way. That's the way that we're going to help make sure that we're all safer in the years to come and that we combat climate change. And if I'm elected president, the first thing that I would do, like Senator Klobuchar also has said, is sign an executive order recommitting us to the Paris Climate Accord so that we lead again.
Congressman Ryan, I got a full question for you here, which is simply this. There are a lot of the climate plans include pricing carbon, taxing carbon in some way. This type of proposal has been tried in a few places, whether it's Washington State, where voters voted it down. You've had the yellow vest movement. We had in Australia one party get rejected out of fear of the cost of climate change sort of being put on the backs of the consumer. If pricing carbon is just politically impossible, how do we pay for climate mitigation?
Well, there's a variety of different ways to pay. We talk about different ways of raising revenue, and I think we've got to build our way out of this and grow our way out of it. But let me just talk real quick to the previous question about real politics. We could talk about climate, we could talk about guns, we could talk about all of these issues that we all care about. We have a perception problem with the Democratic Party. We are not connecting to the working class people in the very states that I represent, in Ohio, in the industrial Midwest. We've lost all connection. That we have got to change the center of gravity of the Democratic Party from being coastal and elitist and Ivy League, which is the perception, to somebody from the forgotten communities that have been left behind for the last 30 years, to get those workers back on our side so we can say we're going to build electric vehicles, we're going to build solar panels. But if you want to beat Mitch McConnell, this better be a working class party if you want to go into Kentucky and take his rear end out. And if you want to take Lindsey Graham out, you got to have a blue collar party that can go into the textile communities in South Carolina. So all I'm saying here,
thank you, Congressman Ryan.
All I'm saying here
Thank you, Congressman Ryan.
So Chuck, all I'm saying is here, if we don't address that fundamental problem with our connection to workers, white, black, brown, gay, straight, working class people, none of this is going to get done, Chuck.
Thank you very much. We're going to keep moving. Congressman Delaney, I'm going to get to you.
I introduced the only bipartisan carbon tax bill in the Congress.
All right. 30 seconds, go.
All the economists agree that a carbon pricing mechanism works. You just have to do it right. You can't put a price on carbon, raise energy prices, and not give the money back to the American people. My proposal, which is put a price on carbon, give a dividend back to the American people. It goes out one pocket, back in the other.
Thank you, Congressman.
I can get that passed my first year as president with a coalition of every Democrat in the Congress and the Republicans who live in coastal states. Because Republicans in Florida, they actually care about this issue. This has got to be our way forward if we're actually serious about this issue.
Congresswoman Gabbard, we're going to move here. One of the first things you did after launching your campaign was to issue an apology to the LGBTQ community about your past stances and statements on gay rights. After the Trump administration's rollbacks of civil rights protections for many in that community, why should voters in that community, or voters that care about this issue in general, trust you now?
Let me say that there is no one in our government at any level who has the right to tell any American who they should be allowed to love or who they should be allowed to marry. My record in Congress for over 6 years shows my commitment to fighting for LGBTQ equality. I serve on the Equality Caucus and recently voted for passage of the Equality Act. Maybe many people in this country can relate to the fact that I grew up in a socially conservative home, held views when I was very young that I no longer hold today. I've served with LGBTQ service members, both in training and deployed downrange. I know that they would give their life for me, and I would give my life for them. It is this commitment that I'll carry through as President of the United States, recognizing that there are still people who are facing discrimination in the workplace, still people who are unable to find a home for their families. It is this kind of discrimination that we need to address.
But it's not enough. It's not enough. If I can add to this, it's very important.
30 seconds,
this is not enough. Look, Civil rights is some place to begin, but in the African-American civil rights community, another place to focus on was to stop the lynching of African-Americans. We do not talk enough about trans Americans, especially African-American trans Americans, and the incredibly high rates of murder right now. We don't talk enough about how many children, about 30% of LGBTQ kids, who do not go to school because of fear. It's not enough just to be on the Equality Act. I'm an original co-sponsor. We need to have a president that will fight to protect LGBTQ Americans every single day from violence.
Thank you, Senator Booker.
Senator Klobuchar, let me put this to you. On the issue of civil rights, for decades, on the issue of civil rights and demographics, honestly, and politics, for decades, the Democratic Party has counted on African-American voter turnout as step one to winning elections on a national level. Democrats are counting on the Latino community now and in the future in the same way. What have you done for Black and Latino voters that should enthuse them about going to the polls for you if you're your party's nominee?
My life and my career and my work in the Senate has been about economic opportunity. And to me, this means better child care for everyone in this country. And when you want to have an economy that works, you need to have retirement that works. You need to have public schools that work. And you also need to make sure that those communities are able to get those jobs of the future, the STEM jobs. In fact, Donald Trump, one of the first bills that he signed, of the 34 he signed where I was the lead Democrat, okay, that's a first up here, was one that was about that, making sure minority community members could share in those jobs. So to me, this is about a few things. It's about an African-American woman that goes to a hospital in New Orleans, says her hands are swollen, and then doctor ignores her and her baby dies. It's about the fact that African-American women make 61 cents for every dollar a white man makes. So in short, we need to, one, and I will do this in my first 100 days as president, we will work to make sure everyone can vote at this table. Everyone can vote in this country. And we will also go to the next step of criminal justice reform. Senator Booker and I worked on that First Step Act, but we should go to the Second Step Act, which is to help all our communities across.
Senator, thank you very much. 30-second follow-up to you. Secretary Castro, this is a 70% Latino city here in Miami. You are the only Latino Democrat who is running this year in the presidential race. Is that enough of an answer? What Senator Klobuchar is describing there, an economic justice agenda, is that enough to mobilize Latino voters to stand with the Democratic Party in a big way?
Well, I also think that we have to recognize racial and social justice. And, you know, I was in Charleston not too long ago, and I remembered that Dylan Roof went to the Mother Emanuel AME Church, and he murdered 9 people who were worshiping, and then he was apprehended by police without incident. Well, but what about Eric Garner and Tamir Rice and Laquan McDonald and Sandra Bland and Pamela Turner and Antonio Arce? I'm proud that I'm the only candidate so far that has put forward legislation that would reform our policing system in America and make sure that no matter what the color of your skin is, that you're treated the same, including Latinos who are mistreated too oftentimes by police.
Secretary Castro, thank you.
Let me go over to Lester Holt, who's got a question, I believe, a viewer question.
I'm over here, Chuck. Thanks. We ask voters from across the country to submit their questions to the candidates. Let me read one now. This comes from John in New York, who submitted this question. He asks, does the United States have a responsibility to protect? In the case of genocide or crimes against humanity, do we have a responsibility to intervene, to protect people threatened by their governments, even when atrocities do not affect American core interests? I'd like to direct that question to Congressman O'Rourke.
John, I appreciate the question. The answer is yes, but that action should always be undertaken with allies and partners and friends. When the United States presents a united front, we have a much better chance of achieving our foreign policy aims and preventing the kind of genocide to which you refer, the kind of genocide that we saw in Rwanda, the kind of genocide we want to stop going forward. But unfortunately, under this administration, President Trump has alienated our allies and our friends and our alliances. He's diminished our standing in the world, and he's made us weaker as a country, less able to confront challenges, whether it's Iran or North Korea or Vladimir Putin in Russia, who attacked and invaded our democracy in 2016, and who President Trump has offered another invitation to do the same. He's embraced strongmen and dictators at the expense of the great democracies. As president, I will make sure that we live our values in our foreign policy. I will ensure that we strengthen those alliances and partnerships and friendships and meet any challenge that we face together. That makes America stronger.
What about the War Powers Act?
Congressman O'Rourke,
What about the War Powers Act being a part of that equation, with deep respect to the congressman? Look, we've learned of painful lessons as Americans, that we've gone to war without congressional authorization. And look, this is very personal for me. I know the cost of war. My dad served in the Pacific in World War II in the U.S. Army. Battle of Okinawa, had half his leg blown off, and he came home with scars, both physical and emotional, and he did not recover. He spiraled downward, and he ultimately took his own life. And that battle didn't kill him, but that war did. And look, even in the humanitarian crisis, and I think we should be ready, Congressman, to intervene. God forbid there is a genocide, but not without congressional approval. Democrats and Republicans, both in the Congress, have not challenged presidents and have let them get away with running the military without the congressional approval. We learned a lesson in Vietnam we seem to have forgotten. And the decisions have to be made by the United States Congress.
I want to pick up
in the
this
name
point,
of the
and I
people.
want to put this to Congressman Ryan. Today, the Taliban claimed responsibility for killing 2 American service members in Afghanistan. Leaders as disparate as President Obama and President Trump have both said that they want to end U.S. involvement in Afghanistan. But it isn't over for America. Why isn't it over? Why can't presidents of very different parties and very different temperaments get us out of there? And how could you?
I appreciate that question. So I've been in Congress 17 years, and 12 of those years I've sat on the Armed Services Committee, either the Defense Appropriations Committee or the Armed Services Committee. And the lesson that I've learned over the years is that you have to stay engaged in these situations. Nobody likes it. It's long. It's tedious. But right now we have, so I would say we must be engaged in this. We must have our State Department engaged. We must have our military engaged to the extent they need to be. But the reality of it is this president doesn't even have people appointed in the State Department to deal with these things. Whether we're talking about Central America, whether we're talking about Iran, whether we're talking about Afghanistan, we've got to be completely engaged. And here's why. Because these flare-ups distract us from the real problems in the country. If getting drones shot down for $130 million because the president is distracted, that's $130 million that we could be spending in places like Youngstown, Ohio, or Flint, Michigan, or rebuilding.
Congresswoman Gabbard, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, actually, to jump off what he said. He described engagement as the problem.
Is that what you will tell the parents of those 2 soldiers who were just killed in Afghanistan? Well, we just have to be engaged. As a soldier, I will tell you that answer is unacceptable. We have to bring our troops home from Afghanistan. We are in a place in Afghanistan where we have lost so many lives. We've spent so much money, money that's coming out of every one of our pockets, money that should be going into communities here at home, meeting the needs of the people here at home. We are no better off in Afghanistan today than we were when this war began. This is why it's so important to have a president and commander-in-chief who knows the cost of war and who's ready to do the job on day one. I am ready to do that job when I walk into the Oval Office. Thank you very much.
Listen, I'm going to go down the line. I'm going to go down the line here. Well, you know what? You felt like she was responding. You get 30 seconds.
Very
go.
good man.
Fair
I
enough.
Appreciate that.
I hear what you're saying.
I would just say I don't want to be engaged. I wish we were spending all this money in places that I've represented that have been completely forgotten and we were rebuilding. But the reality of it is, if the United States isn't engaged, the Taliban will grow and they will have bigger, bolder terrorist acts. We have got to have some present there. The
Taliban was there long before we came in. They'll be there long before we leave.
Well,
we cannot keep U.S. troops deployed to Afghanistan thinking that we're going to somehow squash this Taliban that has been there, that every other country that's tried has failed.
I didn't say squash them. When we weren't in there, they started flying planes into our buildings. So I'm just saying right now,
the Taliban didn't attack us on 9/11. Al-Qaeda did.
Well, I understand.
Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11.
I understand.
That's why I and so many other people joined the military to go after Al-Qaeda, not the Taliban.
The Taliban was protecting those people who were plotting against us. All I'm saying is, if we want to go into elections and we want to say that we got to withdraw from the world, that's what President Trump is saying. We can't. I would love for us to.
Protecting Al Qaeda right now in Saudi Arabia.
I want to go down the line here, finish up foreign policy. It's a simple question. What is the biggest threat to who is the geopolitical threat to the United States? Just give me a one-word answer, Congressman Delaney.
Could you repeat the question?
Greatest geopolitical threat to the United States right now, Congressman Delaney?
Well, the biggest geopolitical challenge is China, but the biggest geopolitical threat remains nuclear weapons.
Okay.
Right? So those are different questions.
Totally get it. Go ahead, Governor Inslee.
The biggest threat to the security of the United States is Donald Trump, and there's no question.
Congresswoman Gabbard.
The
greatest geopolitical threat.
The greatest threat that we face is the fact that we are at a greater risk of nuclear war today than ever before in history.
Senator
Two
Klobuchar.
threats: economic threat, China, but our major threat right now is what's going on in the Mideast with Iran. If we don't get our
try to keep it at one, or slimmer than what we've been going here. One or two words.
Our existential threat is climate change. We have to confront it before it's too late.
Senator Warner.
Climate change.
Yeah, Senator Booker.
Nuclear proliferation and climate change.
Secretary Castro.
Say China and climate change.
Congressman Ryan.
China, without a question, they're wiping us around the world economically.
And Mr. Mayor.
Russia, because they're trying to undermine our democracy, and they've been doing a pretty damn good job of it, and we need to stop them.
All right. Well, thank you for that wide variety of answers. And I mean that. No, I mean that that's what this debate is about. This is the best part of a debate like this. Congressman O'Rourke. Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report outlines multiple instances of potential criminal behavior by President Trump. House Speaker Pelosi has publicly and privately resisted any move toward impeachment in the House. If the House chooses not to impeach, as president, would you do anything to address the potential crimes that were outlined in Mr. Mueller's report?
Yes, and I'll tell you why.
How, by the way, if the answer is yes?
One of the most powerful pieces of art in the United States Capitol is the Trumbull painting of General George Washington resigning his commission to the Continental Congress, at the height of his power, submitting to the rule of law and the will of people. That has withstood the test of time for the last 243 years. If we set another precedent now, that a candidate who invited the participation of a foreign power, a president who sought to obstruct the investigation into the invasion of our democracy, if we allow him to get away with this with complete impunity, then we will have set a new standard, and that is that some people, because of the position of power and public trust that they hold, are above the law, and we cannot allow that to stand. So we must begin impeachment now so that we have the facts and the truth, and we follow them as far as they go and as high up as they reach, and we save this democracy. And if we've not been able to do that in this year or the year that follows, and under my administration, our Department of Justice will pursue these facts and ensure that there are consequences, there is accountability, and there is justice. It's the only way that we save this country.
Thank you, Congressman O'Rourke.
Congressman Delaney, because of the accountability issues that Congressman O'Rourke was just describing there, and the real political landscape in which Nancy Pelosi is saying that impeachment will not be pursued in the House, it raises the prospect, and the Mueller report raises the prospect, that President Trump could be prosecuted for some of those potential crimes down the line. No U.S. president has ever been prosecuted for crimes after leaving office. Do you believe that President Trump could or should be the first?
I guess there's always a first.
Should he be?
I don't think anyone's above the law. I don't think anyone is above the law, including a president. I support Speaker Pelosi's decisions that she's making in the House of Representatives right now as Speaker. I think she knows more about the decision as to whether to impeach the president than any of the 2020 candidates combined.
Conceded.
So,
on the
but
issue of prosecution.
I do think no one's above the law, and this president, who is lawless, should not be above the law. But I will tell you, Rachel, the one thing when you're out doing as much campaigning as I've done, 400 events, all 99 counties in Iowa, this is not the #1 issue the American people ask us about. It's not. They want to know what we're going to do for health care, how we're going to lower pharmaceutical prices, how we're going to build infrastructure, what we're going to do to create jobs in their communities. You know, last year in our country, 80% of the money for startup businesses went to 50 counties in this country. There's over 3,000 counties in this country. That's what they care about. They care about what's going on in the public schools. They care about what's going on with jobs in their communities, with their pay, with their health care, with infrastructure. These are the issues. These kind of kitchen table, pocketbook issues are actually what most Americans care about. They never ask about the Mueller report.
Your time is up.
They never ask about it. They want to know how we're going to solve these problems.
Time, sir.
Here's the thing. Senator,
if we let the Republicans run our elections, and if we do not do something about Russian interference in the election, and we let Mitch McConnell stop all the backup paper ballots, then we're not going to get what we want to do.
I got to sneak in. We blew through a break, which was good news to give you more time, so I got to sneak one in now. More of this debate. It's picking up here. It continues right after this.
Hi guys, thank you for tuning in. So first of all, I'm just going to start out by saying that YouTube shut down our channel where we had over 10,000 viewers, at 1.12,000 viewers on the MCSC network. So if you are not tuning in on YouTube, try to go to the Convo Couch YouTube or Facebook or the Robust Opposition Facebook if you can. I don't feel this is a fair debate. They are completely only focusing on certain candidates. They are not giving Tulsi a time to speak. They're not giving a few of the other candidates a time to speak. To be fair, they have selected the people they want to select, and that is how they're playing it. I know Lauren wanted to discuss something right now.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I was really impressed because I was sure that everybody was going to say Russia and China were the biggest threats.
Yep.
And only one person actually said it, and that was de Blasio.
De Blasio.
And he had been doing so well for me. I mean, he'd really been elevating himself as a potential I mean, not that he has any chance, but just in my estimation, I thought he was really hitting on all the right issues until he said that. And then, you know, Beto just said it. He's talking about impeaching on collusion and obstruction, but no mention of the emoluments clause, which is really why we should be impeaching Trump. And then Klobuchar said the same thing. They keep perpetuating this bull crap that Russia interfered with our elections. And it's just so disappointing. And I was happy to hear that Elizabeth Warren didn't say Russia.
She said climate change.
Right. And because climate change and nuclear annihilation are the two biggest threats.
Tulsi did say nuclear annihilation and climate change.
Yeah, I predicted that Donald Trump, that someone was going to say Donald Trump was the biggest threat.
Somebody did.
Of course, somebody did. It's like, wow, is this a Democratic presidential debate or is this Donald Trump's marketing team? You tell me.
Well, to tell you the truth, too, about this particular debate, I thought we'd have a lot more Trump hating than we have. We've had a lot of thumbs downs when we put there. So I am kind of happy the fact that they are going a little bit more towards the issues and staying away from Russia. But out of this crowd, who is the dark horse, the long shot that you really think is shining through, Lauren?
Well, I was kind of, I'm not going to say shining through, but I was kind of liking Tim Ryan a little bit because I didn't know anything about him. And I think that he made some very good points about the heartland of our country, about the War Powers Act. But then he canceled himself to me when he said the Taliban attacked us. I mean, the fact that he doesn't even know who attacked us on 9/11 shows that he is not ready for prime time, you know?
And that's, I think, there's a saving grace for Tulsi more than anything, and she tried to get in so many times, was that she was able to correct Tim Ryan. Now, I wanted that debate to go against Elizabeth Warren in a dream scenario to have it there, but at least we have some sound bites right there where it shows that Tulsi Gabbard is strong on foreign policy.
And
Fiorella?
here's the thing, foreign policy is everything, and none of these people are really relating. Tulsi hasn't even had a chance to relate the immigration issue to the war issue and the no more wars thing, and she needs to be able to do that because everybody else is just giving really weak foreign policy arguments, and that's where she shines, and she needs to go further on that.
All right, we're going to get back. William, when we get back from the break, you're going to be able to start us off. We want you to go over to the Convo Couch YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next break.
Please.
And the Roblox opposition.
My personal page.
From Miami, it is time now for closing statements. Each candidate has 45 seconds. We want to begin with former Congressman Delaney.
Closing now?
Closing. Okay, 45 seconds. we could go on.
Together, we are on a mission. We're on a mission to find the America that's been lost. Lost through infighting, lost through inaction. We're so much better than this. We're a country that used to do things. We saved the world. We created the American dream for millions of people like myself, the grandson of immigrants, the son of a union electrician who went on to become a successful business leader and create thousands of jobs. But we did these things with real solutions, not with impossible promises. And those are the roots that we have to get back to. I'm running for president to solve these problems, to build infrastructure, to fix our broken healthcare system, to invest in communities that have been left behind, to improve public education. I just don't want to be your president to be your president.
Your 45 seconds
I want to be your president to do the job.
Thank you,
This
sir.
is not about me. This is about getting America working again.
Thank you.
Mayor de Blasio, Mayor, your closing statement.
It matters. It matters in this fight for the heart and soul of our party that we nominate a candidate who has seen the face of poverty and didn't just talk about it, but gave people $15 minimum wage. It matters that we nominate a candidate who saw the destruction wrought by a broken health care system and gave people universal health care. It matters that we choose someone who saw the wasted potential of our children denied pre-K and gave it to every single one of them for free. These things really matter. And these are the things that I've done in New York, and I want to do the same for this whole country. Because putting working people first, it matters. We need to be that party again. Let's work together. With your help, we can put working people first again in America.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio. Right on time.
Governor Inslee, 45 seconds.
Trinity and I have 3 grandchildren. We love them all. And when I was thinking about whether to run for president, I made a decision. I decided that on my last day on earth, I wanted to look them in the eye and tell them I did everything humanly possible to protect them from the ravages of the climate crisis. And I know to a moral certainty, if we do not have the next president who commits to this as the top priority, it won't get done. And I am the only candidate, frankly, I'm surprised. I'm the only candidate who's made this commitment to make it the top priority. If you join me in that recognition of how important this is, we can have a unified national mission. We can save ourselves. We can save our children. We can save our grandchildren. And we can save literally the life on this planet. This is our moment.
Governor, thank you.
Congressman Ryan, your 45 seconds.
There's nothing worse than not being heard. Nothing worse than not being seen. And I know that because I've represented for 17 years in Congress a forgotten community. They've tried to divide us, who's white, who's black, who's gay, who's straight, who's a man, who's a woman. And they ran away with all the gold because they divided the working class. It's time for us to come together. I don't know how you feel, but I'm ready to play some offense. I come from the middle of industrial America, but these problems are all over our country. There's a tent city in LA. There's homeless people and people around our country who can't afford a home. It's time for us to get back on track. The teacher in Texas, the nurse in New Hampshire, the waitress in Wisconsin, all of us coming together, playing offense with an agenda that lifts everybody up.
Thank you,
I will only promise you one thing. When I walk into that Oval Office every morning, you will not be forgotten. Your voice will be heard. Thank you.
Congresswoman Gabbard, you have 45 seconds for your closing.
You know, our nation was founded on the principles of service above self. People who fled kings who literally prospered on the backs and the sacrifices of people. Coming here to this country, instead putting in place a government that is of, by, and for the people. But that's not what we have. Instead, we have a government that is of, by, and for the rich and powerful. This must end. As president, our White House will be a beacon of light, providing hope and opportunity, ushering in a new century where every single person will be able to get the health care they need, where we will have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink, where we will have good-paying jobs in a new green economy. Join me in ushering in this new century with peace, prosperity, opportunity, and justice for all.
Congresswoman, thank you.
Secretary Castro, you have 45 seconds, sir.
Me llamo Julián Castro y estoy postulando por presidente de los Estados Unidos. The very fact that I can say that tonight shows the progress that we have made in this country. Like many of you, I know the promise of America, My grandmother came here when she was 7 years old as an immigrant from Mexico. And just 2 generations later, one of her grandsons is serving in the United States Congress, and the other one is running for president of the United States. If I'm elected president, I will work hard every single day so that you and your family can get good health care, your child can get a good education, and that you can have good job opportunities, whether you live in a big city or a small town. And on January 20th, 2021, we'll say adios to Donald Trump.
Senator Klobuchar, the floor is yours.
3 things to know about me. First, I listen to people, and that's how I get things done. That is my focus. I have a track record of passing over 100 bills where I'm the lead Democrat, and that is because I listened and I acted. And I think that's important in a president. Everything else just melts away. Secondly, I'm someone that can win and beat Donald Trump. I have won every place, every race, and every time. I have won in the reddest of districts, ones that Donald Trump won by over 20 points. I can win in states like Wisconsin and Iowa and in Michigan. And finally, yeah, I am not the establishment party candidate. I've got respect, but I'm not that person. I am the one that doesn't have a political machine, that doesn't come from money. And I don't make all the promises that everyone up here makes, but I can promise you this. I am going to govern with integrity, I'm going to have your back, and I'm going to govern for you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senador Booker, sus 45 segundos.
Gracias. 50 years ago this month, my family moved into the town I grew up in because after being denied a house because of the color of their skin, it was activists, mostly white activists, that stood up and fought for them. That's the best of who we are as America, and why when I got out of law school, I moved into the inner city of Newark to fight as a tenant lawyer for other people's rights. I've taken on bullies and beat them. I've taken on tough fights, and we've won. And we win those fights not by showing the worst of who we are, but rising to who's best. Donald Trump wants us to fight him on his turf and his terms. We will beat him. I will beat him by calling this country to a sense of common purpose again. This is a referendum on him and getting rid of him, but it's also a referendum on us, who we are and who we must be to each other. It's time we win this election, and the way I'll govern is by showing the best of who we are, because that's what this country needs and deserves.
Thank you.
Congressman O'Rourke, 45 seconds.
Our daughter Molly turned 11 this week. I'm on this stage for her, for children across this country, including some her same age who've been separated from their parents and are sleeping on concrete floors under aluminum blankets tonight. If we're going to be there for them, if we're going to confront the challenges that we face, we can't return to the same old approach. We're going to need a new kind of politics, one directed by the urgency of the next generation. Those climate activists who are fighting not just for their future, but for everyone's. Those students marching not just for their lives, but for all of ours. We'll need a movement like the one that we led in Texas. It renewed our democracy by bringing everyone in and writing nobody off. That's how we beat Donald Trump. That's how we bring this great country together again. Join us. This is our moment, and the generations that follow are counting on us to meet it.
Thank you, Congressman.
Senator Warren, you have 45 seconds for the final statement of the evening.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. Never in a million years did I think I would stand on a stage like this. I was born and raised in Oklahoma. I have 3 older brothers. They all joined the military. I had a dream growing up, and my dream was to be a public school teacher. By the time I graduated from high school, my family didn't have the money for a college application, much less a chance for me to go to college. But I got my chance. It was a $50 a semester commuter college. That was a little slice of government that created some opportunity for a girl, and it opened my life. I am in this fight because I believe that we can make our government, we can make our economy, we can make our country work, not just for those at the top. We can make it work for everyone, and I promise you this, I will fight for you as hard as I fight for my own family.
We would like to thank all of the candidates who participated with us tonight, and that will do it for night 1 of this 2-night event. And guess what? We've got 10 more candidates tomorrow night.
We certainly hope you will join us then, but for now, that concludes our coverage of this first Democratic debate from Miami. For Savannah, Jose, Chuck, and Rachel, I'm Lester Holt. Have a good night, everyone.
So, welcome back to the Democratic debate coverage, the corporate-free one with the power panel up here on stage. We just concluded the first debate. Oh, it's powerful. That's why we brought you here. We want to thank you for coming on up, William. Fiorella, let's start this off. Who in your minds won this debate? Who in your minds lost this debate tonight?
I really don't see it that way at all, because I feel like it was made to have Elizabeth Warren look like she won, and it was made to have the outsider candidates look like they lost. So I'm not going to really fall for that narrative. I think overall Bernie Sanders was live on the debate stage here today.
Yes,
they
he
were
was.
all
Yes,
echoing
he was.
Talked about that.
entirely. They were echoing everything he has said, repeating the same sentences that he has been repeating that were once called radical a few years ago. And frankly, like, this debate just made me more angry and made me more completely against Elizabeth Warren and against pretty much every single candidate that's being propped up by the mainstream media, specifically because they are doing this on purpose, and it's very obvious. And I think maybe obvious to us and maybe some progressives, but it might start getting obvious to the general public. And I think that's by having the show of who is more virtuous and who can virtue signal more than the other. I mean, there's just been a lot of pandering. Did you need to speak Spanish 500 times? The majority, like Beto, Castro, speaking Spanish all the time. It's really offensive to me. I don't need to know how well you speak bad Spanish. I need you to tell me how you're going to solve the issues America is facing. And that's just my overall feel for the debate. I don't feel like it's fair to say, oh, Elizabeth Warren won the debate because she was given a chance to look like she won the debate. And I feel like if I were to say that, that's what it's going to look like. That's what it's going to look like. And I think Beto O'Rourke and probably it's a tough fight between Tim Ryan and Beto O'Rourke. I think did pretty bad, especially Beto O'Rourke. I think he's done.
Lauren Steiner, who won and lost the debate tonight?
Well, I don't think that there was any clear winner, and I disagree with half of your statement. I think they were trying to favor Elizabeth Warren, but by the end, I even mentioned to you guys that she had been out. They hadn't asked her questions in most of the last half hour. So I think she did a good job. I don't necessarily think she won the debate. I feel that there's a problem when you have 10 candidates in there, because they don't really have an opportunity to give in-depth answers. And I really enjoyed the back and forth, a couple of back and forths that we saw, because it gave them an opportunity to see, contrasting. When they ask these questions and they say exactly what they want to say, and actually, I did feel that most of the time they did answer the question. There were very few times that they may not have started out answering the question, but they did eventually get to it, except for the one with Tulsi and Hezbollah. And I do want to point out, even though I'm not the person on this panel who is Tulsi's #1 fan, I like Tulsi, but I thought that was disgusting. And I'm going to say that right now.
Yes, totally.
The way that question was phrased, there was no other question that attacked a candidate in the way that question attacked.
What about the LGBT one, though? They followed up with their rhetoric by attacking her and asking her a question about the LGBT community and why people in the LGBT community should trust her.
It's
they went and attacked her personally.
That kind of question is like, when did you last beat your wife? I mean, if they don't get called out on that by their fellows, although I don't expect anybody in the journalism field to call out anybody else, because they are not even stepping up to the defense of Julian Assange.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it is outrageous to me that these they'll write their one little obligatory editorial and now radio silence while this man is being railroaded. So, these journalists are disgusting, and I'm just happy.
They're not journalists.
I'm happy that you guys are watching us, because we're giving you the real, like we said, corporate-free spin here. And just in answer to the question, I don't necessarily think anybody won the debate. I think a couple of people were definitely canceled.
Who's that?
Well, I think, like I said, I think Tim Ryan is just not ready to, take center stage when he thinks that the Taliban attacked us on 9/11. And, de Blasio, he had me going for a while, but...
Until the
Russia comment was ridiculous. He just didn't need to go there. Delaney was canceled for me before we even started, Terrible. I mean, I want to say one thing about, I'll make this point later. Maybe we'll go to
William. Winners and losers of tonight.
I'm team CONVO couch robust opposition. There were no winners or losers. Everything was bland. This was contrived. I mean, some things that stick out to me. Well, in the closing statements, my best line, or the best line that I was hearing, was, Congressman or senator or secretary, your 45 seconds is over. That's what did it for me. That's what did it for me. But yeah, de Blasio, his passion stood out.
Yes.
He was a pleasant surprise, but I wouldn't say he was a winner, though. As you all shared earlier, clearly this was a slanted debate or debacle for Warren. But yeah, this needs to be, this field needs to be condensed.
Yeah.
This was stimulation overload or underload, if you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, it was here. We did it. We went through it. So
can I tell you, I think somebody won tonight? Cory Booker. You know what I'm saying? The next day is going to be important when people go out there. We understand Cory Booker. We understand how platitudey and full of shit he was, but his passion showed, and his sound bites are out there, and they followed up with him, and he got a lot of applause. Remember when I said there's a long shot that I think can really come out of this tonight? It's Cory Booker to keep an eye on him. Yes, I also think that Julian Castro did well for himself, and he'll be around for the next debate.
But is that really winning when it's just a bunch of platitudes and a bunch of things?
It's not winning for us, but when we're talking about the people who are going to vote, and like I said, we have a responsibility right now to wrap up from this debate, go back into it, and expose these people like Cory Booker for who he is. We laughed at some of this stuff because we understand Bain Capital. We understand his vote when it came to the prescription bill. We have to expose that, but when he was on stage tonight, he made the most of it, I thought, and I thought he won over a lot of people like he did at that KDEM convention.
Yeah, I still don't know, because I needed to hear reparations from him. I needed to hear about racial justice.
They didn't ask the question. There was no question on racial justice.
You're absolutely correct, but he brought up racial issues.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so if you're going to bring up racial issues, you can talk about racial justice. Like, don't be scared to be black. Like, you're black. Like, handle it. Like, so I guess for me, I mean, like you all said, he's pandering, platitudes, fine, but still, like, I didn't see him as a winner because clearly he did not express him loving his community, let alone him really loving himself with no policy to back it up.
Right.
So,
there was no policy because he kept saying, "Oh, I grew up in this neighborhood. I live in this neighborhood."
Right.
He talked about
in
his
my
neighborhood
city
50 times.
Right.
Like,
ooh,
but
real
nothing
quick
there.
to your point. So no one, and he's talking about when he was mayor of a city, and you all are saying, let's call him out on his BS. Let's talk about the $100 million he received from Mark Zuckerberg to invest back into his city's public education, and they wasted that money.
Right, no, he's a charter school
Exactly.
shill. I mean, for people that don't know,
Yeah.
Cory Booker founded DEFR, which stands for Democrats for Education Reform. And education reform is code for privatization. And right now, they used New Orleans as an example of shock doctrine. After Katrina hit that city, they rebuilt they rebuilt it with all charter schools. There are no public schools left in New Orleans. And this is what Rahm Emanuel was trying to do in Chicago. But people don't understand that Arne Duncan, who was Obama's Secretary of Education, was just as bad as Betsy DeVos when it came to this. So education privatization is not something that Republicans have a monopoly on. In fact, it was started under Obama with Democrats for Education Reform, and Cory Booker was right there with it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, let me just point out some losers tonight, and I want your guys' opinion on what you think about who I thought is done for, is donezo. I think that, number one, the biggest loser of the night was Tim Ryan.
Check.
I mean, he got going a little bit. He started speaking. We started learning a little bit about him. And then, out of the only two tussles inside this debate, one of them being with Tulsi, it was Tulsi's moment. It was her moment for her soundbite. It's her moment for her clip. They're going to hear it over and over again. How she set the record straight. Excuse me, sir. The Taliban did not attack us.
Attack us on
911.
Yeah, that was. So I wrote that down. Yeah.
Boop, it put Tim Ryan in the donezo. Inslee, his whole global climate change, Greenpeace. His whole shtick of that is number 1, 2, and 3. It didn't shine through tonight enough, and I think he's done. Klobuchar, she had some moments. I think she said We have two women on the stage over here that are, going to shed some light on.
Yeah.
She had her soundbite right there. But then again, she put her foot in her mouth so many other times. And her first question, she just looked like a lost person. And then, of course, I have Beto. Every time he spoke Spanish, I got nauseous. John was about to throw his headphones over there, Johnny Tsunami. He said, desecrating my language over here. He just seemed pandering the whole time. So I think those four are out. But I do think, once again, Cory Booker came out shining. I think Julian Castro definitely did himself well. And de Blasio showed a lot of passion tonight, and it might show forth as well. Fiorella, do you have any losers at all that you think are not going to be on this stage at all?
Definitely Beto. I hope he drops out for his sake. He's just embarrassing himself. I definitely think Ryan as well.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the two biggest ones that I feel like completely. Oh, Tom Delaney too.
John
Delaney. Yeah. See, like he was barely there.
Yeah.
And when he was there, he didn't really answer the questions well enough.
He was speaking from a place of privilege. It was so clear that every answer that he gave was from his place of privilege. And what I appreciated was that some of these other candidates clearly were going around and feeling people's pain, to use Bill Clinton's, the thing that Bill Clinton was associated with. I feel your pain.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say something about the climate change, because this debate tonight was so clear why we need to have a separate debate on climate change. First of all, most of them said that it was the most important issue threatening us. Not even, in a question where I'm sure those two shills, Chuck Todd and Rachel Maddow, were expecting them to talk about Russia, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it must have ruined Rachel's night
that
they didn't bring up, that more than one person didn't bring up Russia. But when they talked about it, you could see starting to get into some very specific questions. And Delaney was talking about a carbon tax. And I think it really needs to be said that a carbon tax and cap and trade are market-based mechanisms that do nothing to solve the problem, because it just allows a company like Chevron to pollute up in Richmond, California, or down here in Wilmington or Torrance, in a low-income community of color, as long as they buy a rainforest somewhere in South America.
Right.
So what we need, and they didn't mention this, and it'd be interesting to see if anybody besides Bernie Sanders, because we know that he put this into the Democratic platform in 2016, is going to come out and call for a ban on fracking, number one, and number two, to stop subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. This is the richest industry in the planet, and they continue to get subsidized, and it's got to stop.
Yeah. William, really quick. You said you were looking for Tulsi Gabbard to score some points tonight. Now, she was silent most of the night. She tried to jump in. She got silenced, and I think this whole debacle of 11 people, 10 people on stage, I'd rather them had 5 people on stage and done a 4-night event. I don't care. I would have thought we got a little bit more into it. But do you think Tulsi did enough with that exchange from Mr. Ryan to give her some brownie points moving forward?
In her closing statement, yes. But that and obviously the exchange that she had with I believe Delaney or
with Ryan.
With Ryan, with Ryan, when she said the Taliban did not attack us on 9/11.
Yeah.
That's gonna hold. That's gonna stick. I think that's.
I hope
gonna
we're
stick.
already making a meme or a soundbite on that.
She should have jumped in environmental change with the Off Fossil Fuels Act.
But she hasn't introduced that yet. And my question is, why not? We're already almost done with June, and she still has not reintroduced the OFF Act. It was a 2-year bill. It expired at the end of 2017. And I asked her about that, and, I didn't think her answer was good. But look, she got the biggest applause line of the night, and she got it twice when she said we have to get out of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So I hope that the other candidates were paying attention to that, because even though there were a lot of people in this audience that had to pay a lot of money to get in there, this was an audience of privilege, she still got, and maybe it was just the grassroots people that were clapping.
Yeah, we heard Nico yelling, screaming back there.
But she still got a huge applause line, and I was happy. I was happy for her for that.
Well, let me ask you a question, Fiorella, here too, because we'll give this over to Lauren, because I know she's going to have something to say. Elizabeth Warren was very present in the beginning of this debate, and she spoke all the time. They went back to her, but really the last part of the debate, she was kind of silent. She really didn't say much. I don't even know if she got many questions, maybe one.
Yeah.
Do you think she helped or hurt herself tonight, or just held serve?
I think she held serve because, and I do think there's a reason psychologically why in the beginning you get to start and see her. First of all, the majority of people in the beginning were going to be the ones watching. People then get distracted and have other things to do, and they stop watching. So I think it's a tactic to make it look like at the end she didn't say very much. But in the beginning, that's when most people are like excited and watching, and there's that momentum build. And to consistently have her in the beginning was a way to help her. They didn't just help her, they helped Cory Booker out. They constantly referred to Cory Booker. The Democratic Party in California really likes Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren, so I'm not really surprised that they were the two chosen ones that were being constantly referred to.
Lauren Steiner, she has a plan. What was it?
Well, I think, as I said in the first break, that I think she really acquitted herself on this Medicare for All. She answered the question very strongly that she is for Medicare for All and she's for eliminating the private health insurance industry. So I plan, if I see this anymore on Twitter, I plan to make a soundbite myself out of this and put it out there, because I feel like there's things you can attack her on, and she has been attacked on this. So if she, in fact, has succumbed to pressure and is now going balls out for this Medicare for All, then why aren't we giving her credit for it?
Because she's gone back and forth with it for the last few times. So, and she also co-sponsored, instead of co-sponsoring Bernie Sanders' own bill, she went ahead and did her own thing.
She
and
did
if you read
co-sponsor
it,
his bill.
But
She most certainly did.
Then she went ahead and did her own thing. Why not just support Bernie's?
So what finish your sentence.
I'll tell you why. Because there are people, this goes back to the same debate about saving the ACA. I mean, you remember when Trump was trying to get rid of the ACA, there were a lot of Democrats, including Bernie Sanders, who said we have to support the ACA. So if they feel that there are incremental things that they could do, let's face it, this is going to be the biggest, heaviest lift in this country. I have an entire book on 4 years of presidents who've been trying to do this.
Yeah.
And it is a heavy lift. There's a reason that it's not in this country and it's in every other country, and it's because of the power of this industry. So if she understands how hard it's going to be to get this done, and she can think of other things that can help people incrementally, like get people onto Medicare when they're 55 instead of 65, that problem, I don't have such a problem with that incremental solution as I do with the public option. Because the public option, which by the way, I and many progressives supported in 2009.
So did Dennis Kucinich.
Yes.
Who she didn't campaign for.
We now know that the public option is actually going to be harmful for Medicare for All, because what's going to happen is the sickest patients are going to go into Medicare, into the public option, and it's not going to be sustainable. It's going to blow up, and the industry is going to say, see, we tried government-run health care, we can't do it. So I think you have to look at these incremental proposals, take each one on their face before you make a decision about it. So I don't so much have a problem with her supporting other things. And I have to look her up on public option. I don't know where she is.
Well, I do, because people are dying, and I mean, we've been accepting incrementalism, and incrementalism simply isn't working. And I feel like someone that's young and doesn't automatically get health care unless I have a job that provides health care, and then I have to pay hundreds of dollars a month. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke about this. As a server, she didn't get health care, and she would have to get her own type of healthcare or pay hundreds of dollars. And as a bartender or a server, you don't get that option. So to me, it is a big deal. It's not an issue that I'm going to bend very much yay or nay, because like you said, the rest of the countries, the major countries in the world have it. It is an insult to not have it. There is no middle ground on Medicare for All. And if you're not fully willing to embrace it, then I'm sorry, but you are not a progressive. And that's what I base it on. That is the biggest thing I have. And I feel like I do need to go back and look to see policy-wise, what exactly is she now going to push now that she's gone back and said, oh, I support Medicare for All? What does that mean? Because if you remember during the debate when she spoke to access to women's the abortion issue,
which is what they should
access
have.
is a word, maybe she shouldn't have used that word, because it is a word that automatically
Access
means
is code.
It's code.
No,
it's absolutely
Yes,
wrong.
it is.
I'm going to push back with you on that, because it's code in health care. Having access to health care is not the same thing as having health care. Having access to abortion is what you want. You don't want people to have abortions. You want people to have access to abortion.
Yeah,
Do
but
you
if
know
they
what I'm
can't
saying?
afford it and they can't spend the money,
That's
then the
what
access
access
is nothing.
means.
No, free. If you say it's covered in the plan, then it's
100%
free.
covered.
Then it's 100%. But if you're saying we're providing access,
But it is
that might
covered.
come with a price
And
tag.
let me tell you something, people out there, in case you don't know this, I have a very big audience tonight, and people who watch my show know this because I keep stressing it over and over again. Planned Parenthood is against single-payer health care.
Yes, they are.
Planned
They are.
Parenthood
They are.
takes money from the big insurance companies, and it's very hard to figure this out because if you're a nonprofit, if you're a 501c3, you don't have to disclose your donors. And where I found this out on all places was a Right to Life organization who had gotten a hold of their donation records. So A, they take money from the top health insurance companies. B, they sent a letter to Anthony Rendon, who's the Speaker of our Assembly, commending him for shelving California's single-payer bill. C, they paid their CEO, Cecile Richards, $750,000 a year, at the same time as suing one of their affiliates, the workers in one of their affiliates in one of the states, I can't remember the states, because they wanted to start a union.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you are concerned about women's reproductive rights, find any other organization other than Planned Parenthood to give your money to because they are not our friends.
Do you know something that wasn't mentioned tonight that I thought was kind of odd? And I kind of, we've talked about this on our show too. And William, I'm interested on your take about this. They didn't talk about student debt relief. They didn't talk about something that's been so much in the news cycle lately.
Oh my God.
And the reason
You're
why I
right.
think they didn't talk about it is because when we talked about, Bernie's bill with AOC and who else was on there? It was Ilhan Omar and then our girl from Seattle.
Yeah, Jayapal.
Okay. It would wipe out 95% of the student debt. Wasn't there a cap on Elizabeth
Yes,
Warren's
there
bill?
was.
So I think that's why the mainstream media avoided this topic because they didn't want somebody calling her out on this.
We've got many other debates.
Well, let's see, William. What do you think
Many
about
other
that?
debates.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, right?
Yeah.
Because the mainstream media has like this crazy kind of amnesia when it comes to issues and like issues at the forefront that you would think they would bring up. Like I said, obviously going back to reparations, they didn't talk about that. They didn't talk about student debt. Even when we talk about Medicare for all, and when Elizabeth Warren brought it up to say, she wants to take out the private health insurance companies, nobody talked about the healthcare disparities within our within our medical system, and so forth. And that is really profound.
Hold on a second. We got to get that up. Somebody talks about it. Somebody talks about it.
Exactly. Because I'm also thinking, I'm hearing when I hear Medicare for all, I'm hearing it, or should I say, when healthcare is talked about, I'm hearing it from the perspective of a hospice chaplain, right? Mm-hmm. And when I have to work with patients, I just did a BEDAO work, I think. When I talk to patients who are receiving Medicare, which pays for hospice, pays for the entire hospice bill and hospice care, I'm thinking about the patients that I have served who have to go on hospice because they don't have enough money. They can't pay the co-pays, or they didn't get the treatments in order to get the cures that they had anticipated and the treatment.
They only have access. They only have access.
Exactly. So it's really, because so like you said, the whole code word access. Let's go back to when George Bush was debating Al Gore, and he said he believes in affirmative access. He doesn't believe in affirmative action, right?
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
Well, we had certain questions tonight, and I think that you can expect there'll be other questions that weren't touched tonight that will be touched on tomorrow. At least I hope so, to make the debate fair. I don't want anybody to gain an advantage by looking what was on tonight and saying, okay, we can apply that to tomorrow.
Right.
Lauren, what questions did you not hear tonight that you would love to hear tomorrow?
Well, aside from that one that we just talked about, I feel education, and not just higher education, but the issue that we've had 2 years now of teachers' strikes.
Yep.
And we've got an onslaught of privatization and charter schools. And I would have liked to hear, Cory Booker's answer about charter schools. I want to hear everybody, because this is something that Bernie has a plan for. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, he just talks about banning for-profit and, regulating heavily nonprofit. But for people that don't No, it's not just a matter of whether they're for-profit or non-profit. All charter schools are bad in that they defund public education. They're privately managed businesses, whether they're for-profit or not. And we need to stop the expansion. Right now here in California, we're fighting for a couple of bills. 2 of them have been shelved and made into 2-year bills. And one of them, we need to make calls, Californians, because Connie Leyva, who's chair of the Education Committee, is about to defang 1507. And I hate to get wonkish with the national audience, but basically one of these teeny little incremental reforms that the California Teachers Association put forward was to say these charter schools, when they're criminal or they're not serving their mission, they can go and get, if the city denies them, they can go to the county, and if they can't go to the county, they go to the state. So this is a bill to say no, they have to only go to the city, the issuing authority. And this amendment that she wants to put back in says, no, they can go to the county.
Yeah.
So here's where the sausage is made, folks, And here, the other thing about these candidates is it's one thing to say you put forward a bill, but are you going to actively go out and try to find co-sponsors for your bill?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Somebody was going after Elizabeth Warren the other day because she didn't join Bernie's bill. It was called Democracy Day. He had a bill, because she said, I have a plan, we're going to make Election Day a national holiday. And somebody was like, oh, you stole that from Bernie, but why didn't you co-sponsor his bill? So I looked into it, and there were no co-sponsors for the bill. It didn't even have a hearing. So what you have to understand with Bernie sometimes is he uses his bills like the bully pulpit. He doesn't necessarily work to make sure they become law, but he puts them out there almost like a press release.
Yeah, it's to change the talking points. So tomorrow, you're expecting a whole deep dive, hopefully, of education. Fiorella, what wasn't talked about tonight that you would love to hear tomorrow?
Definitely the student loan debt, but above all else, I want to hear these candidates answer their questions on interventionism, because I feel like that wasn't asked at all. Venezuela. I want to hear about Iran.
Venezuela.
I want to hear about I want to hear more to put them on the spot to see if they still support our interventionism. Again, to have them talk about Syria or even Russia, and I want to hear these candidates be asked the tough questions that Tulsi Gabbard was asked.
Tulsi Gabbard did
Which
not
is unfortunate.
really drop the ball on that.
No.
I
think she was trying to get in some time, and I think she was doing the rope-a-dope and trying to wait for that punch, and she was able, unfortunately, to get it when it came to Mr. Ryan. But what about tomorrow? She has education. Fiorella has Venezuela regime change war when it comes to. Is there anything that you didn't hear tonight that you'd like to hear tomorrow, William?
Well, I've been saying it all night. Racial justice, right?
Yeah.
So that. But also,
weren't you impressed with how they got that in there? Some candidate, I can't remember which one, said their names.
Yes, Julian Castro.
That's what I'm saying. Castro.
I was looking.
He scored brownie points tonight.
He literally brownie points.
And they were talking about how we have to reform, the
right.
relationship with the police, which De Blasio did do.
Yeah, but also I think so. So we talk about the issues of what's not going to be talked about. Excuse me, sorry. But also there's going to be one person. There's going to be someone or an issue there that was the elephant in the room tonight, and that was Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
He's going to be there.
Yes.
But
racial issues, racial justice.
Another issue, too, that I want to mention, and that's trade, because right now we're in the middle.
Trade would be another one, too, as well. But I want to hear what he has to say on racial justice, though. What do you want to hear? What kind of debate would we have?
What I want to hear, well, obviously, reparations has been talked about, right?
Yes.
But it has been talked about in a very narrow, focused capacity. We can talk about H.R. 40. Senator Cory Booker tried to get a companion bill to that, and he did not do that, or did not mention it tonight. So they didn't talk about that. Another one is job security, right? It's one thing to have a job, but then with the job that you have, is it not just paying you a living wage, but do you have the benefits and things of that nature? Do you have the sick leave? Do you have the maternity leave? Do you have the paternity leave, as we do here in California?
Yeah.
So none of that was talked about, and I think that should be lifted up tomorrow.
Lauren, you said something about trade, because a lot of people don't understand trade. They haven't dealt.
Right.
They don't even understand the word mercantilism.
Okay, well,
they don't
I'm not
understand that.
Neo-mercantilism.
So it has a lot to do with trade, but they don't understand it out there. But why don't you give us a little insight about what we can talk about tomorrow?
I want to say that I've been fighting the Trans-Pacific Partnership since 2012, and since 2012, pretty much. And Obama was, in his tone-deaf fashion, he was pushing it through the entire primary season. And Hillary Clinton couldn't walk away from that fast enough. She said that she was not for it, but the fact of the matter was she touted it 45 times as Secretary of State. And Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump were both on the same side of that. They were against NAFTA and they were against the TPP. And that's how I think Trump was able to win.
Absolutely.
So I think
one of the biggest reasons.
What's really important is, and he did get us out of the TPP, but now he's got the new NAFTA, right? NAFTA 2.0, and it is only marginally better than the old NAFTA. So, and it's got some things in there that are more scary than even the TPP.
Yeah.
So the fact of the matter is, we need to find out what these people want to do on trade. The obvious thing is to say we want fair trade, not free trade, because what happens is we've got a race to the bottom where, you know, I have a family business that went out of business because of NAFTA. You know, we were employing thousands of people in the South in a manufacturing business, and then when NAFTA came in, the wage became too expensive. They had to go to maquiladoras in Mexico. When China joined the WTO in 2000, they were making too much money. My sister by then was running the business. She was a single mom, couldn't keep going to China, and we ended up closing a third-generation family business over this, and you know, thousands of people lost their jobs. So the thing that Elizabeth Warren said that I totally disagree with, and I would love to see someone challenge her on this, is the idea of bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States. I don't think we're going to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States unless and until we can get one wage, and this is where I'm going to sound really socialist here, working people of the world unite.
Yeah.
We have to have one wage so that we don't have this continued race
A
to the bottom.
UBI, a universal
Yes,
basic
and that's
income,
the other
Mr.
thing,
Andrew
you
Yang
know,
tomorrow.
and I think tomorrow with Andrew Yang in the debate, you're going to hear a lot more about robotization and automation.
Absolutely.
Because let's face it, we're not bringing these jobs here. We have to think of what are the jobs for tomorrow. And I will tell you something, that fighting fossil fuels, I'm also fighting the unions, the Building Trades Union.
Yeah.
And they're about to organize, folks. This summer, I just heard this weekend that the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers are paying canvassers to go door to door against the Green New Deal. We're trying to get 100% clean energy here, and this union is going to be working against us. And so the reason is they can make $120,000 a year in a refinery, and I guarantee you that solar installers are not making that kind of wage, and they're not even unionized. So unless we figure out a way, you know, to have what they call a just transition, and this is part of AOC's Green New Deal, you know, we're going to be thwarted.
Well, let me digress to. I'm sorry.
Have a quick question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because I think, Lauren, you bring out something really insightful and profound. If I'm hearing you correctly, as it relates to trade and most specifically with unions, I'm hearing this corporatism being infused in union activity, which is
this is California now.
Right,
We're really
No,
well. We're
it's
seeing a
also
lot of this too, though.
nationwide,
But we did see that with the California
why
chairs pair,
Rusty Higgs won.
Rusty Higgs, with what type of, you know, we got unions and good unions and labor and bad labor and how it affects, and also we have to figure out the problems.
Like,
how do we
it's
transition?
almost like a disguise or a decadent veil of sorts. Like,
Right. That's how the fossil fuel industry protects themselves. They align themselves with labor because these people are working in these oil companies and they're making money. So the issue is we need to find them work in these new technologies, in this green energy.
And they have to be good paying jobs.
Good paying jobs. That's the way to do it. Otherwise, you're always going to have this battle between the unions and the environmental justice. And that's a huge battle we shouldn't be having right now. And it's a battle that we're having now. What Lauren's talking about is these people want a blue collar revolution because they are completely against the Green New Deal and anything resembling that.
Well,
I mean, they literally picketed Eric Garcetti house when he did the one good move that he did this year, and he said that we are not going to invest $3.5 billion into aging fossil fuel plants. And this was something that was unexpected. He went against the consultants that the DWP, we have our own municipal water and power agency here in LA. He went against their recommendation, and said, we're going to shut this down. And then he was picketed by this very same union. And I want to say one more thing about unions. They also are against single payer. I just found this out the other day, and that is because they want to have something to offer their members, which is a good benefits package.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of people think that if we just make universal health care, we'll take that decision out of the employer's hands, and then it just will clear up so much money.
And then unions won't have anything to gain their members.
Absolutely.
But you can still advocate for your fellow union folks in light of how they're treated at the workplace. Like, what the heck? Okay, carry on.
Let me make a really point too before we get on to tomorrow, is that I just want to point out, since we're on this whole thing of trade, is that when these candidates on the stage were starting to blame China, they are wrong. Right. It wasn't China who screwed us. It was our government. It was our leadership. It was the oligarchs, the people who made so much money hand over fist. They're the ones we should be pointing the finger at, not China. Right. China has a thriving, growing, big, gigantic middle class, while our middle class is shrinking. China hasn't been to war in decades, okay?
Jimmy Carter said it. Jimmy Carter was giving that advice to our current president when he was asking how to navigate trade with China. And Jimmy Carter at church in his Sunday school class said, when do you remember China going to war?
Yeah, exactly. Before we get to tomorrow, where can we find some of you online so we can track you down and see your stuff, Mr. William?
So you all are getting me out of my cocoon.
Yes, this is it. We're trying.
Unfortunately,
I made you come up here. I said, William, come out of the cocoon.
Incognito, but you all are pulling me out of here. So, but you can find me on my public Facebook page at the Somerville Exchange, which also has the website thesomervilleexchange.com, which. This is an added stretch to me from last week because I was fortunate enough to speak in a very comprehensive capacity about Juneteenth and reparations to the South Orange County Democratic Club. So that's progress.
You streamed that on, didn't you? That was online. I saw that.
They put it online. I just was going to speak. I was a guest. So.
Reparations will be a big conversation to come.
Because you fix racism, you fix America.
Well, that I have to think that starts in the family. I'm not one of those people that always sounds like a Republican with personal responsibility and all that, but that really does start with how we raise our children.
Well, that's the thing.
Which is not to say that obviously we have systemic institutional racism in this country, and we have to fix that.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But I'm just saying it's more complicated. And
I'm saying both and, not either or. Right. Yeah. So we need to talk about the family, but we also need to talk about policy. So it goes both. It goes both and rather than either or. And to your point, in some suggestions around how to address it in the family, there's a book out by Resma Menakem called My Grandmother's Hands, and it talks about the hysteria why white European Americans treat black people and people of other ethnicities negatively, going back to what happened, what elite Europeans did to non-elite Europeans during the Middle Ages and Dark Ages.
Yeah.
And how that pain, that abuse, that oppression was passed down to the nervous system. And so now we get to about 1681, where this term whiteness comes around. And hence it becomes comfortable to white European Americans in order to soothe themselves in perpetuating oppression on other communities of color, most specifically African Americans. So it goes both and rather than either.
I'm so sorry, Johnny. Is there any technical difficulties? I saw some spam going on there. Is there any way we should ignore and just ignore the spam, ladies and gentlemen?
I just want to say something in regards to that. I believe that in order to achieve racial justice, we must also have economic justice, because a lot of the economic justice gravely impacts people of color, especially the Black community, more. I know Breanne Joy Gray talked about that. If we have Medicare for all, there's such a disparity between the white population and the Black population. It will absolutely help the Black population economically to have Medicare for all. And the same thing goes for education. Like, education, this isn't just an issue about economics, it's also an issue about race, because in fixing the economics, you also fix the racial disparities that exist.
Law, economics, education, religion, real estate, healthcare, international affairs, media, all of that, all those interlocking institutions needs to that's where a comprehensive reparations, racial justice component needs to be addressed. But like I said, the conversation is starting.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, totally.
And there really needs to be research around it.
Yeah.
There needs to be, as well as the environment, right?
Yeah.
Because Flint, Michigan, they're in Florida, right? We're dealing with hurricanes, right? So yeah. So
I think a big part of that whole, coming together is also realizing who the true enemy is. I think the oligarchs' greatest power is to keep us all divided so they can run off with all
white
the money.
supremacy.
So understanding that, where it's coming from and how it's coming and how we have to treat each other, because, like we said, at what point, we keep towing the lines and we still yell at people that we don't agree with. We call them racist and whatnot.
Right.
And that line seems to be drawing over further and further. And me and Fiorella talk about it too as well. We talk about NAFTA being one of the biggest problems of why Donald Trump got elected.
Yeah.
We also got to remember identity politics played a lot of play.
Exactly.
Because when you tell poor white people that are living out in their car and they're out in the streets that they have a privilege too, it just sometimes comes off in the wrong way. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
It's not just a word, it's the way we kind of look at each other, which we really, really need to address.
Intentional, right?
all right.
That's intentional, right?
Yes.
So I want to ask you if you think a woman or a black person can be president. I mean, I know that we had Obama. He was already the president, so that obviously milestone has been met. But he explicitly did not make race and being, because he did not want to be the black president or the president for black people. So he did not come through, I feel. I mean,
I agree.
Better to speak
I
on
agree.
that. But
and most specifically, as this new movement is coming out, American Descendants of Slavery, that's what he did not have to carry that weight around.
Right. Well, now that's kind of has to be on the table, and Bernie definitely needs a better answer for that. And I feel like from what I've been reading, and I did a deep dive into the ADOS website and also the Black Lives Matter, the Movement for Black Lives website, and it's so much more than a direct cash payment.
Right.
A lot of people don't even want that direct cash payment because, as Dallas Fowler said, who's a fellow African-American Bernie delegate, without financial literacy, a cash payment is not going to help in the long run. It's just like deals with the symptom and not the problem. But here's the thing. Like, getting back to my point about racism, Eric Holder makes the point, and he was the attorney general for Obama. So he was the highest lawyer in the land. And he talked about still being pulled over for driving while black. So you can have all the educational opportunities. You can be living in the richest section of town. You can still, because of your skin color, and this is something that poor whites don't have to face, be discriminated against. And that's why I say this comes somehow to the family and the other. And I feel that unless we have more integration, because look, what happened with gay people in this country, I think there's much less prejudice against gay people because people started coming out and everybody found that they had a family member, they had a friend, they had somebody that they worked with who was gay. There was the Ellen show, there was Will and Grace, and it's become like normalized, And it kind of has paved the way for trans people to now. That's going to be the next fight, is for trans people. But this racism thing, to me, it's just so intractable. Oh, and the other thing that they didn't discuss was Israel. And
that might come tomorrow.
That is going to be something that they have to discuss, and maybe it'll come tomorrow. But I want to know if you guys think that they're going to make Bernie into Tulsi tomorrow. Meaning, are they
they're going to go for the attack?
Are they going to ask the questions of Bernie Sanders, like, Americans really aren't ready for socialism?
They will.
So,
how
they
do you?
absolutely will. And they're going to try to say that he doesn't pay attention to racial issues, which is entirely false. He does. He's just a big picture thinker, and I think he needs to be able to unite those things together.
Exactly. But see, this is what I can appreciate about Bernie saying when he was first asked about reparations and whatnot, and he said, "What do you mean by that?"
Right.
That was really given. We knew exactly what he knew exactly what we meant. Right. But I can appreciate that he took that posture because he does not posture himself as a white savior to black people.
Right.
Let's be very clear about that.
He does not.
So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because I think when we talk about racial justice and the comprehensive platform of what reparations can bring and mean, because reparations defined is repairing the damage that white supremacy has caused. That's what reparations is.
But shouldn't it be paid through white supremacy, through the people who made all that money, all those oligarchs? Because at the end of the day, just like Reverend Barber talked about, numerically, it was a micro and a macro that now all the white people in the middle class, there is no middle class. Right. We are all slaves to the form of debt, to this monetary system.
Right.
So, I mean, if we start pulling in this kind of thing of reparations, wouldn't it be kind of divisive in some ways towards you think middle America can actually cost somebody like Bernie Sanders the election?
Well, that's the question, right? That's the question. Are we, once again, do we be civil at the expense of someone else's oppression that we continue to benefit from?
Exactly.
Well,
right. That's the real question.
Yeah.
That's and that takes some conviction.
But my understanding is that not all African Americans even support reparations.
No, but they're not.
This is more like a hashtag, if you will, almost like Black Lives Matter started out as a hashtag.
I'm going to dismiss it as a hashtag.
I don't think it's just a hashtag. I mean, it was started as a hashtag, but it's always been an issue that's been researched going back to Randall Robinson and Charles Ogletree, who's a African-American Harvard professor. So, like...
But then what about, this is where I have the problem with identity politics, because, I talk to African-Americans and they say, well, we can't, until we deal with slavery, that's the original sin. We can't talk to you about anything else. But then you talk to Native Americans and they say the same thing. Until you deal with the genocide that was put upon our people, then we can't talk about anything else. Then you talk to feminists and they say, no, patriarchy is the original sin. And then it's like, and meanwhile, the capitalists are laughing all the way to the bank because they've got us divided and fighting amongst each other. And everybody knows that the Democratic Party is great on the quote unquote social issues. But when it comes down to economics, we're right there with the Republicans.
But see, I'm not addressing, and what I'm talking about is not identity politics. Because the problem because identity politics suggests and says, for what it's worth, it's what Obama did. He exercised identity politics to the best.
And they're taking it to the next level.
And they're exactly with Kamala Harris, with Cory Booker and so forth.
In other words, just representation.
Exactly. It's just
representation.
Right. That's the problem with identity politics. It's representation. And I disagree with a lot of African Americans who are on that identity politics kick. Because if you're talking identity politics for me to support you just because you're black, I'm going. Don't expect for me to stay
I hear
here.
you.
And I would suggest I would not have your listeners or your supporters support any person of minority, color, or African American. If they cannot support their community, you should not support them.
So no Cory Booker then.
He's done.
He's out.
He's out. No Kamala Harris. She's out.
She's out.
Oh, yeah.
They can't stand her in Frisco.
If nobody's talking about to the systemic issues for that when we talk about for Native Americans, when we talk about African Americans, when we talk about women's rights, when we talk about black women, right? So there has to be communal comprehensive response to identity, not just identity. And that's the problem that we have in our political
we need to be able to differentiate
right
between that.
Exactly.
You know what was not talked about tonight when we talked about, I didn't give a chance to give my answer and stuff. Poverty.
Right.
Poverty's never addressed. It wasn't addressed on the Obama debates. It's never
not
addressed. And this is
2016.
something that really...
Affordable housing.
Right.
There's not one in the 50 states can a person making minimum wage afford a 2-bedroom apartment in all of the 50 states.
That's crazy.
So it's not
purchase
just
a home, right?
expensive cities.
Yeah. And to your point, Lauren, that I really when to your point, I think about when people say the phrase California is leading the country in X,
they
Y,
don't
Z,
know.
right? So Willie Brown, he broke it down, I think. Brown broke it down, right? He really broke it down to articulate, to say when that statement is made, it's to suggest that what's wrong with California is what's to come for the rest of America.
That's a great saying. That's a great saying.
That's what I'm getting from. So that's what I think what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
We have 10 minutes left. Let's get on to tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
We're going to 9 o'clock. Did you say something?
Sure, why not?
9
We have
o'clock. 10 minutes left. Let's talk about tomorrow.
Do we have any questions, Johnny, that people want us to address?
You want to address some questions?
Oh yeah, thank you.
Does anybody
You
have
wanna
any
pick out some
questions for
questions?
us?
Yeah, but it's very small, John, today. I can barely
You
see.
want to find us some good questions, John?
Take a look over there and then just let us know. But
I wanted to just talk about the socialism thing, because at some point we have to have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren on the same stage. Perhaps the reason they didn't ask about socialism, which is a very important thing to discuss, is because he wasn't there with her. So it'll be interesting to see if they ask it tomorrow.
They will.
Without her there.
Oh, they will.
And
They
use
will.
it as a cudgel against him.
They will.
They
You know?
will.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm hearing the fix is in and like we can do nothing about it.
Yeah.
Oh, this is really
But
problematic for me on so many levels.
He's got to have better answers, because I heard him on Cassie Hunt this morning, and he went off to, he always diverts to his classic stump speech where he talks about things in the macro instead of being very specific. He needs to answer the question, how are you going to pay for it with Medicare for all? You know, or
Didn't he lay that out, though?
No. Aren't your tax? But no, you have to hear how he answered it to you. I'm going to show you this interview because he gets to it, but he has to say yes. You know, when the question is asked, aren't your taxes going to go up? You say yes, the taxes are going to go up, but most people will pay less overall because they won't have co-pays, premiums, and deductibles.
Yeah.
And stop cluttering his answer with healthcare is a right.
Everybody
and not a
clutters that answer, though. Can't we start saying that taxes, can't we just refer to it as an expense? Instead of using the word taxes, say a tax is an expense. And this expense is going to cost you so-and-so, but it's not going to cost you money here. Because that's one thing I think they just don't have they can't clear the pavement for it. And they can't just say, listen, it's an expense. The word tax frightens people.
Yeah.
And it frightens independents and Republicans. And they haven't framed this argue right. Fiorella, what do you think that Bernie needs to do other than explain socialism, which Lauren said, tomorrow, to come out victorious?
I think he needs to go hard left. He needs to be the Bernie that people fell in love with, the Bernie that, not just his stump speech, but the Bernie that attacks these corporations, that literally tells people you're being cheated. You shouldn't have to work 70 hours a week and still barely make it. You shouldn't have to sleep in your car when you have a full-time job. He needs to really go left. And he started doing that with the student loans. He started doing that by speaking out against Iran, by being that hardcore leftist Democratic socialist. A lot of people say that we need to placate to the centrists, and I think that's entirely the wrong thing to do.
Right.
We are seeing either the hardcore leftists like Tiffany Caban yesterday, who won the primary for Queens, New York, as a district attorney. And she's very similar to Larry Kratzner, who won in Pennsylvania. And we're seeing those kinds of people win, the AOCs, the Ilhan Omars. We're not really seeing centrists win with so much momentum and support unless they are running.
Because you are talking about Democratic urban areas. We have him running for presidency, and he's got different regions of the country. He's got the urban versus the rural. He has to be very careful. And when I'm talking about, I'm not saying he should change his policies, obviously. I'm saying he needs to change his rhetoric. And when somebody asks him about socialism, first of all, he is not a democratic socialist. He's a social democrat. And there is a difference. Kyle Kulinski did a really good thing on this. It's democratic.
And I disagree with that. But
you disagree with Kyle's?
Yeah, I do. I don't think he's the end-all be-all answer to everything. But
No,
here's
but
the
I'm-
thing. Like, what you see in the Netherlands, what you see in over there, it's socialism. People have this. It is. People have the idea. People have the idea that socialism does not. It doesn't have a free market. It does. It does. What you're thinking about is communism.
No, I'm not thinking about communism. I'm thinking about socialism.
Hold on,
Here's
it's
my
William.
challenge
William.
with how socialism, democratic socialism, social democracy is not being articulated, because we're making it too complex, and it can be very simple. And that is democratic by the people, socialism for the people. That's it.
Yeah.
Make it simple.
Yeah.
Okay, but you need to say what that means, and
And
I
then
think
you can explain it.
Look,
but
I do help people with messaging, and
Yeah.
I think what he needs to say is that he is democratic socialism for him is FDR style Democrat. Okay,
It's a
and
New
what
Deal
he
Democrat.
has said in his speech on democratic socialism is he talks about FDR's economic Bill of Rights that he was working on, and he wasn't able to implement it because he died. Okay, so that's what Bernie's talking about. He is not talking about nationalizing private industry and expropriating private property. Now, I personally think that we should nationalize things. You know, Elizabeth Warren talks about breaking up Facebook, Google, and Amazon. And I think that,
I agree with that.
I think that should happen. But I also think in the case of Facebook, they should be nationalized. Because nationalizing
should be a public utility.
That would be the second thing, would be a public utility, and then the third thing would be broken up and highly regulated. Because right now, this is dangerous. They are the public square, right? Google and Facebook, 70% of people get their news through Google and Facebook, and they are censoring who gets on there right now. You know, we're all focused on Alex Jones, but last summer, they deplatformed 800 left-wing Facebook pages, including VenezuelaAnalysis.com, which is not even affiliated with the Maduro government. It's an independent, not corporate, news outlet in Venezuela, from which people could actually see what's going on in Venezuela.
I mean, Lauren, they shut off our live stream today. The MCSC network was shut off today because that had a lot of people going, and it didn't have the same corporate pundits on there spewing the same bullshit. Now, tomorrow, I'm going to give you my number 2. I'm going to go down the line and see you guys give me who your number 2 is. OTB, which stands for not off-track betting. It stands for other than Bernie. Tomorrow, my guy who I'm looking out for is not a guy. It's actually a girl. And I think that Marianne Williamson has to make a strong... She's got to make a strong showing. This woman could take over the Betsy DeVos position, right? This woman really cares about the children. She could be the Secretary of Education. So I look for, other than Bernie Sanders, and I would like to see the 2 outsiders, other than Bernie, align themselves with Bernie to get some clout. Fee, who's number 2 for you tomorrow?
I mean, I think Marianne Williamson is someone I actually like a lot more than everybody else besides Bernie. But I think Andrew Yang is going to be popular out there with the with his $1,000 a month UBI. But the problem with this idea that he's going to have to explain is how is that going to work under a capitalist system? It cannot work under a capitalist system when you don't have a federal jobs guarantee and all that. That's the reason I'm not for Yang, because I feel like it cannot exist in a capitalist system. And I think I want to do a video defining the socialism and democratic socialism and everything else, because ultimately it means that people have the means of production. You can call it whatever it is, but when people have the means of production and there are things that they all have together, that is socialism. We might be afraid of that word, and for the people. Exactly. And Bernie Sanders has been the one that has been honestly comparing himself to FDR the whole time. He has been talking about FDR, so he can call it democratic socialism. That's fine. I'm okay with it. I don't care as long as we get that kind of thing through.
Yeah.
Lauren, number 2.
Well, I think that she does well when she's grilling somebody in the Senate hearing. I think I really hope that Michael Bennet and John Hickenlooper flame out, because they're horrible.
They're running back from Wisconsin, Michael Bennet?
They're both from Colorado, and they're both corporatists, big fossil fuel industry. They prevented, because
who's your number 2?
Well,
Give me a number 2, Lauren. Come on.
Answer the question.
Answer the question, Claire.
I think that Buttigieg is going to do very well, because I don't like him, but I think he's going to do very well.
He's the one I worry about the most.
I think Andrew Yang is going to do very well. Yeah. And I think Kristen Gillibrand is going to do well, because I do.
Who's your number 2?
I don't like
Who's
her.
the number 2? Put it on record.
Who do I personally like?
Number 2, who you were looking for to shine other than Bernie tomorrow?
I would say Andrew Yang.
William.
Marianne Williamson.
Yeah, all right.
100%. Now, I will say this too. I want to say this because I'm like, want to speak prophetically, right? I hope whoever, because it was wishy-washy tonight when they talked about gun control, but whoever gets the nomination, one recommendation I would put forth for a vice presidential candidate is Stacey Abrams. She can articulate. I know.
She can't say a full sentence without mentioning Obama's name.
Right.
So, I mean,
or access to.
But like I said, that's why
she said the identity politics of who we are.
No, but she really.
And she's working for Neera Tanden.
And Joe Biden. All right, that's it.
Cut his mic.
Cut his mic over there. Cut his mic.
Let him speak.
She talks to gun control very well.
She does.
That's my point. Like we still need the South like people like in a very real way. So that's just my take on it. So,
I think Bernie's got, if we want the South, Bernie's got to get his young people out. That's what Maxine Waters said to me.
Oh, you with Maxine, sister Maxine.
Anti-Maxine.
Anti-Maxine. I can't
She said
stand that
Bernie
one
didn't get
too.
his young people out.
Whatever.
70 to 90% of people supported Bernie in the polls, but only 20% of that demographic voted. So these young people, they got to just not go to they can't just go to the rallies. They have to go to the polling place.
But my number 2 is Marion Williams.
Mine too. And listen, Lauren, pull up your Facebook real quick so you can give some shout outs. We want to thank you all for joining in tonight. The Convo Couch, Robust Opposition, and William, thank you so much for coming up here. This was awesome. I hope you come do stuff with us like this more often.
You all have been very welcoming and affirming.
Yes.
This was a necessary stretch for me. Yeah. So thank you for getting me out of my comfort zone.
I'd like to talk more, and I know Fam would too. We'd like to talk more about reparations, identity politics.
I think I'm on.
Those conversations need to be had, and the way you kind of approach it is good. I personally don't believe in reparations 100%. There are other things I'd like to do. To get some straight.
You a white European American brother. I know why you don't do it. That makes sense.
A lot of people will say that, and they'll get into the entitlement thing.
It's not an entitlement issue. It's just you're not the beneficiary of oppression. That's just it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. I would love to have a debate.
Yeah, that's another debate. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I'm glad
some of that Stacey Abrams stuff over there.
And really, Lauren, I'm really glad you spoke to this trade piece because that's where I'm very limited in understanding, and so you really brought that home. So thank you so much.
Right, we got some information
in educating me on that.
So tomorrow night, join us back over here, the Convo Couch YouTube, Lauren Steiner's Facebook. We will have Ron Placone will be sitting in the same seat that Mr. William Moses is in tomorrow, and that's Get Your News On.
Somerville is the last name.
William Moses Somerville. I'm awful at it. She hates me. From now on, you say it, so I don't have to say. Ron Placone, Get Your News On. Well, Ron will be in the seat. He actually was just doing a little debate wrap up. I want to send some shout outs to some people online on our Facebook. Karen Shanks, Sonia Weber. Hello, how are you doing? It's great to see that you're with us. Michiko is there as well. Mark Bartold. We have also Mike Patino. We had Melissa Michelson earlier, I saw was on there as well. Valerie Flanagan, and my friend Vincenzo Finelli, who got blocked on my personal Facebook, is now stalking us on the Convo Couch. Thank you for joining us. Tita Kachita, we love you too as well. Brian Forbes, Betty Bell, Craig C., thank you so much over on the YouTubes. We want to thank you all, and for the MCSC Network people who came on over, please like, share, and subscribe.
Please
Mark
subscribe,
Ryan,
you guys.
Pete D, Kurt D, Mark Walker, Rosie O'Donnell, Brian Maldonado, we love you.
All right, you're hogging all the shout-outs.
Wait 1 second, 2 seconds. I'm going to hand it right on over. I just want to send some love to our people. Mark Ryan, Upstate Raider, and the rest of the MCSC crew. Lauren Steiner, who you got over there?
Well, I can only scroll up a little ways, so right now I can just thank Pam Wall and Steve Wolfbrandt, who are two of my,
love you, Steve.
and Keith Sikora,
love you, Keith.
Three of my most faithful viewers. Singy Bird.
Hi, Singy.
Diana Parmeter, Josie Garcia, Alex Alexander, and that's who we've got. So my Facebook page is facebook.com/Lauren.Steiner.la. My Twitter is @Lauren_Steiner. And my YouTube channel is Lauren from LA. So thank you very much for watching. Tomorrow we'll be back in the same space, and we will have a live audience because I'm doing double duty tomorrow. I'm also hosting a Bernie debate watch party where we're going to get the audience involved in the next step of the Bernie political revolution.
Nice. And I am Fiorella Isabel on Facebook, Fiorella_IM on Twitter, and on YouTube. Check out the Convo Couch and subscribe because the MCSC network was shut down. Are we still open? Is the channel still open? Or
Our channel is still on.
No, the MCSC channel. Is that open? Okay, because I thought I saw it there, but I'm not sure if we're going to be streaming from there because Nico was informed that it was taken down for a while. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Please come over to the Convo Couch.
Gotcha. Sorry, didn't mean to step on your last thing. For the Convo Couch, Pasta Jardula. Fiorella Isabel, Lauren Steiner, and William Moses Somerville.
And Johnny.
And Johnny Tsunami and James Roguski.
My man.
Thank you, James, for
For
being
everybody here, thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Convo out.
Peace to the Middle East, chicken grease.